The King's Avatar audiobook by Kevin Chapter 341. A ferocious tiger flurry Wang Jixi's play style was both flashy and quick. On the other hand, most elementalist spells required a long cast time. Even if you didn't dodge his attacks, using magic to attack wouldn't be easy. However, Chu Yunxiu wasn't the only person who was fighting. Sima Cheng served as her helper. Seeing that Chu Yunxiu was intent on charging forward, she immediately began firing back ferociously. Artillery shells soared through the air, trying to force Wang Jixi's Vacaria to retreat. Chu Yunxiu seized this opportunity. As long as the attacks that reached her didn't interrupt her cast time, she wouldn't need to care about them. A long chain of spells fired towards Wu Yu's carved ghost. Ice, fire, light, dark elemental spells. Some were main skills Chu Yunxiu's Windy Rain chose to learn, while others were only learned for use when stalling for cooldowns. Right now, she was using all of them, creating a magic explosion that could flatten the lands. Wu Yu's carved ghost didn't have much health left in the first place, so when he saw Chu Yunxiu's map bomb, he immediately felt a sudden surge of despair. On his team, Zhang Xinji's cleric Immovable Rock had hastily run over to rescue him, but in the end, he was one step too late and Wu Yu's carved ghost died under who knew which spell. After a short moment, Carved Ghost's name faded away from the team list. Glory Alliance's famous Ghostblade duo had fallen. Now, Team 2 only had 3 players remaining in battle: Wang Jixi, Deng Fasheng, Zhang Xinji. It had been said that these 3 players' classes comprised of the classic iron triangle formation with their tank, mage, and cleric. It was true that this type of formation was incredible in PvE, but it was also a very balanced formation in PvP. However, they were unfortunately in a 3v5 situation. Even with this formation, perhaps only a miracle could save them. The pros wouldn't give up so easily though. Team 1's biggest weakness was that they had no heals. Chu Yunxiu's Windy Rain had forcefully pushed forward to kill off Carved Ghost, and she currently had the least health on her team. Wang Jixi could only watch as Carved Ghost died in battle and switched his focus onto Windy Rain. Chu Yunxiu had just used everything she had, so the majority of her spells were on cooldown. Her health pool and defense were low as well. If this was a 1v1 duel, then Wang Jixi could probably take her down in less than 30 seconds. Unfortunately, she still had 4 teammates. If Wang Jixi wanted to attack her, how would Team 1's other 4 players not notice? As a result, Team 1 immediately rushed forward in order to save her. For a brief moment, it was as if Deng Fasheng and Zhang Xinji had been forgotten. Wang Jixi's awareness and decision-making were extremely good. When he saw that Team 1 was coming to defend Chu Yunxiu, he immediately made the decision to give up on the easiest target to kill and switch to Sima Cheng's Dancing Rain as his main focus. Vacaria swept his broom and shot forward, directly at Dancing Rain. Sima Cheng didn't react slowly either. She lifted her hands and fired anti-tank missiles towards Vacaria. Suddenly, a shadow jumped out. To her surprise, it was Deng Fasheng's Knight Angelica. He didn't have enough time to interrupt Sima Cheng's attack, so he leaped into the air with his shield raised. The artillery barrage was dispersed as he took the attack for Vacaria. Deng Fasheng and Wang Jixi were partners on the same team. This sort of coordination was already like an instinct to them. Vacaria blocked the anti-tank missiles, and as soon as his body began falling back to the ground, Vacaria flew past him. In midair, he simultaneously leaped off his broom while doing a sweep. Sima Cheng didn't have time to dodge and was launched into the air by Vacaria. Shua, 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 shua. In the air, Vacaria's broom danced in the air. The arcs left by his broom looked as if the broom were cleaning up the air. Vacaria's broom wasn't any ordinary item. It was also a famous silver weapon with quite a haughty name too, Stardust Extermination. Truthfully, his attacks on Dancing Rain were only normal attacks, but the dazzling visual effects looked as if he were using all sorts of skills. Every time his broom swept, it seemed as if the stars were being shattered into glittering dust. Team One's other teammates weren't just going to stand around and watch. They immediately pounced forward to rescue her. Zhou Zekai had already begun firing, but Deng Fusheng once again leaped up to defend. As the bullets were being blocked, Zhang Xinji's immovable rock didn't stand still either. He healed and also cast sacred fire-type skills to restrict the wolf-like pursuers. With just this, it wouldn't be enough to block these four gods, but the battle dragged on. He should be here soon, Zhang Xinji thought to himself. It wasn't a coincidence that Team 1 had intentionally chosen this place to fight in Team 2's dead angles. Team 1 had the ability to see the projection though, and they noticed that Team 2's reserve player had finally arrived. "Careful," Yu Wenzhou warned. He saw that Han Wenking's desert dust was approaching from a rooftop behind them. As soon as his warning fell, Han Wenking's desert dust leapt over the rooftop. As he landed, his left fist extended out in front of him, while his right fist was next to his waist as if it were storing energy. Ferocious Tiger Flurry. As soon as they saw his stance, they immediately knew what desert dust was about to do. Striker level 70 skill, Ferocious Tiger Flurry. His fist shot forward and the strong wind surged into a tiger's roar as a blurry image of a tiger appeared behind him. His punch exploded towards the right shoulder of Yu Wenzhou's Swaksar. Yu Wenzhou had known what Han Wenking was going to do. Even though his hands were slow, it wasn't so slow that there was nothing he could do. When he punch exploded forward, Yu Wenzhou was able to roll backwards, allowing Swaksar to dodge it. However, Ferocious Tiger Flurry didn't end with just a single punch. Desert dust landed on the ground and shot forward like a shooting star. His strikes came out from every direction, trapping Team 1 in his flurry of fists, especially Swaksar, who was in the middle of it all. This sort of chain attack was very difficult for Yu Wenzhou to deal with. After a few exchanges, his methods were blown apart as Han Wenking's desert dust continued to attack unceasingly. Bang! Amidst the Ferocious Tiger Flurry, a clear bang like a dragon's roar sounded out. A blade light flashed like thunder, ripping apart the storm, slicing towards desert dust. "Oh!" The stadium erupted into cries of astonishment. Huang Xiaoshan's troubling rain had finally acted. This was also a blade master high-level skill, Formless Phantom Blade. The blade light intersected. The flurry of fists howled. Han Wenking couldn't ignore it. He immediately turned the direction of his Ferocious Tiger Flurry to directly meet with Formless Phantom Blade head-on. This was his favorite fighting style. They were both level 70 skills. It was impossible to say which one was stronger or weaker. It all depended on how the players wielded them. One was a sword saint, the other a king of fighting. No matter if it was player or character, they both stood at the top of glory. Huang Xiaoshan was at his prime. On the other hand, Han Wenking was one of the oldest players there. Even if he refused to admit it, he knew that he no longer had the same energy as he did during his prime. He could only rely on his stubborn determination and his everlasting desire for victory to push him forward now. Even if this was the all-star competition, Han Wenking's drive burned as strong as ever. Against such an opponent, Huang Xiaoshan was clearly feeling enormous pressure. At the very least, he didn't have time to do any trash talk word bubble attacks. In the end, the two sides were equal, and neither could gain an advantage over the other. However, these types of skills didn't last forever. Ferocious Tiger Flurry had exploded out first, while Formless Phantom Blade had come after. In any case, Ferocious Tiger Flurry would certainly stop first, and at that moment came in the blink of an eye. Ferocious Tiger Flurry's final fist was a fierce punch from his right hand, but Huang Xiaoshan had been waiting for this moment. He gently leaped backwards and dodged outside of the attack's range. His blade flashed like lightning and formless phantom blade continued to slice forward. This was the scariest part about Huang Xiaoshan. His ability to seize an opportunity was what made him tower above others at the peak of glory. Even for Han Wenqing, there was no way of dodging it. His ferocious tiger flurry was in its ending animation. No matter how exceptional one's mechanics were or how determined one was, there was no way one could change how the system worked. However, this wasn't a 1v1 duel. This was a team battle. Huang Xiaoshan's troubling rain stepped forward and his blade thrust out, but a field of white flames suddenly erupted from in front of him. This step forward had to be made. When he had dodged ferocious Tiger Flurry's final strike, he had to jump away one step. If he didn't step forward, then his attack wouldn't have hit. By the time Huang Xiaoshan saw the flames, it was already too late. Due to the nature of the chain's skill, his hands were working faster than his mind was. When he realized he needed to get away, his troubling rain had already rushed forward. Sacred fire. The sacred fire from Zhang Xinji's cleric immovable rock. The instant the sacred fire ignited his body, the level 70 skill was immediately interrupted. The support cleric had only this one pure offensive skill, which silenced the character and the player. Even with no skills left to use, Huang Xiaoshan refused to let this opportunity go by. His normal attack stabbed towards Desert Dust, who was still in his ending animation. He then retreated, seeking his team's protection temporarily. The battle was now a 5v4. Team 1 had the numbers advantage, but Chu Yunxiu's windy rain had lost a lot of health and had no way of recover it. Huang Xiaoshan's troubling rain was still being burned by sacred fire and wouldn't be able to use skills for 3 seconds. However, even worse was Su Macheng's dancing rain. Han Wenqing's sudden attack had disrupted Team 1's rescue mission. At this moment, Su Macheng was being suppressed miserably by Wang Jixi's attacks, and it looked as if she wasn't going to be able to hang on for much longer. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 342 Chapter 342. The violent ladies in the all-star competition. There would certainly be a shot caller. However, when an individual chose to go on his own, the shot caller wouldn't forcefully stop him. After all, this was only for fun. The audience watched it for fun, and most of the players wanted to have fun too. For example, in normal matches where a win or loss mattered, risky strategies might only be employed under very careful consideration. But in the all-star competition, they wouldn't give it a second thought. Chu Yunxiu's previous forceful maneuver was something she would very rarely do in an official match. And this time, Chu Yunxiu once again went out heroically on her own. When she saw that her good friend, Su Macheng, was getting bullied by Wang Jixi, she immediately mustered up her courage and abandoned the team. Her elementalist charged forward like a brave war god in order to rescue her. Yu Wenzhou looked at this and saw that things were starting to get messy. He wasn't unfamiliar with this type of scene, and he didn't really care. He was also an old god. He had participated in the All-Stars several times and had taken the responsibility of shot caller several times as well. When the battle got heated, some players liked to fight on their own. This was something that happened every time in the All-Star match, so no one really cared. But this time, the first one to get heated up in Team 1 was unexpectedly Chu Yunxiu. This was something that surprised Yu Wenzhou. The god, who was well known for breaking down at crucial moments, seemed to be having a lot of fun today. But when he thought again more carefully in their team composition, Chu Yunxiu really might be the only person who would run out heroically like that. On their team, Yu Wenzhou certainly wouldn't, and Huang Xiaoshan was his teammate. If the shot caller had been someone else, then he might have jumped out to go solo. But with Yu Wenzhou taking the seat, he wasn't going to sell off his team captain's face. As for Suma Cheng, she was someone who was accustomed to supporting and coordinating with others. In all her years of playing, she had never displayed any individual style. Besides them, Zhou Zekai's playing was certainly dazzling, but he himself was more of the quiet and obedient type. Playing flashily was certainly his play style, but his individual personality wasn't the show-off type. As for Chu Yunxiu, she didn't seem like the sort of player to do this, but compared to the rest of them, she was the most likely. And the reality showed this. She was already beginning to ignore everyone else and play on her own. This was already almost a type of rule in the all-star competition. It might be someone starting off making a scene and then get more and more serious, or it might be starting off serious and then slowly relaxing. This time, the battle started off abnormally intense. And now someone had finally stepped out in an all-star competition style. No one would complain about this. When Yu Wenzhou saw Chu Yunxiu charge forward, he immediately had the others coordinate with her. Even though this wasn't the best choice of tactics, no one would actually argue over something like this. Team 2 immediately understood Team 1's intent. Han Wenqing, Zhang Xinji and Deng Fusheng grouped together to face them. Han Wenqing was the main attacker. Deng Fusheng would defend. Zhang Xinji would give support. It was another iron triangle formation and the three played exceptionally well. For a short while, they were actually able to block Team 1's 4 players. Scatter, Yu Wenzhou said. Facing the iron triangle head-on wasn't going to work. The other side had a knight with high defense to protect and a cleric to heal. And what did they have? They were all DPS and they could only attack. If they were hit by their opponent, then that damage would stick with them. They didn't have any way to recover from it. Under Yu Wenzhou's orders, the team still followed them like before. They immediately scattered. Huang Xiaoshan's troubling rain continued to charge forward. On the other hand, Zhou Zekai's Cloud Piercer circled around to their side wing, firing while heading towards Wang Jixi. Suma Cheng was getting closer now. The only thought on Chu Yunxiu's mind had been to rescue Suma Cheng. There was nothing to hesitate about. She directly treated the 3 blockers as air and rushed forward to rescue her. As for Yu Wenzhou, he was beginning to coordinate with Huang Xiaoshan in order to restrict the iron triangle. Team 2's 3 players concentrated on meeting the attack, and as they were pushed back, they remained in communication with Wang Jixi. They couldn't let Wang Jixi get isolated by the enemy. Right now, even though they only had 4 players because they had heals, they weren't too worried. Zhang Xinji was a top-tier cleric and he was extremely adept at long, drawn-out battles. Uh-oh. Chen Guo was very worried because the player she most supported was in a very bad spot. Chen Guo also played a launcher, so she was very familiar with the class. Launchers possessed the highest range out of all 24 classes, but their ability in close combat was quite poor. On the other hand, Wang Jixi's witch was a class that had all sorts of different attacks. Wang Jixi also had the name Magician. Suma Cheng had nowhere to run and was being suppressed thoroughly. How long can I last? Suma Cheng asked herself. Even though this was only the all-star competition, it wasn't like she'd be happy if she lost. That would be too unprofessional. Suma Cheng tried hard to hang on and saw her teammates coming, especially Chu Yunxiu, who was practically not caring about anything else other than helping her to escape. But she didn't feel much hope for the rescue. She was even feeling a bit bad because of it. She couldn't help but think of someone. If it was him, would she be bullied like this by Wang Jixi? Bully. Using that word was a bit excessive, but her current situation really did look like that. Suma Cheng couldn't do anything about Wang Jixi's attacks. It wasn't as if she didn't have any confidence in her teammates. Yu Wenzhou's tactics and shot calling wouldn't be any weaker than Ye Xiu's. Huang Xiaoshan and Zhou Zekai's mechanics were top tier. And when Chu Yunxiu rushed forward to rescue her, she didn't care about anything else but the rescue. She knew all this, but she always felt that if Ye Xiu was there, it definitely wouldn't be the same. Even if it was only him, it definitely wouldn't. Suma Cheng discovered that in the end, she wasn't very tough. The times when she was tough were times where she knew that even if he wasn't beside her, he would always be supporting her. Even if the heavens collapsed, he would definitely hold it up and she would be standing in a corner okay. But this time, Suma Cheng glanced at the audience, but she didn't see anything. However, she understood that that spot wouldn't have anyone sitting there. He wouldn't be coming today, let alone suddenly jumping out onto the stage, playing in the match and fighting the opponent like yesterday. What she wanted to happen wouldn't happen. Right now, she could only rely on herself. Yu Wenzhou, Huang Xiaoshan, Zhou Zeka, even Chu Yunxiu. Suma Cheng had never thought of relying on them. She had to rely on herself. When he left the scene, she had already made this decision. But why did she completely forget it when she saw that he wasn't far away? The current him wasn't in a very good situation. If she kept on relying on him, wouldn't she turn into a burden? She liked to be by his side as a helper, but she didn't want to be a burden. It was time to rely on herself. Suma Cheng told herself again. She glanced at her situation and then suddenly swung her gun. Swing was a low-level knock-up skill. The cannon in her hands would swing up at the opponent. It hit. Even Suma Cheng wasn't sure if it was because she was fired up or because she had made a lucky hit, but her perception and fingers suddenly erupted. In any case, when Wang Jixi's Vacaria shot towards her dancing rain, her swing accurately connected with Vacaria. Vacaria was immediately launched into the air. Suma Cheng's fundamentals were solid. She followed up with a barbecue, and even for a god like Wang Jixi, he didn't have time to defend. A knee strike hit Vacaria, launching him even higher into the air. She then used a Gatling gun, and the chain of bullets battered Vacaria. This low-level skill's damage might not do much in the overall scheme of the battle, but after using barbecue, Wang Jixi's Vacaria was sent far away. Using this barbecue, Suma Cheng beautifully performed a delivery gun and planned to send Vacaria all the way to the Iron Triangle formation. This change was too sudden. Let alone others, even Suma Cheng was surprised that her move actually disrupted Wang Jixi's attacks. What's with the two girls today? Why are they suddenly so brave all of a sudden? Yu Wenzhou muttered, but his hand stayed as steady as ever. Seeing that the situation had changed, he immediately set up a new formation. Nice. Huang Xiaoshan's spirits fired up as well. He brandished his blade and rushed forward to welcome Vacaria. In the end, barbecue wasn't a skill with an enforced knockdown effect. The system didn't enforce it. As for Wang Jixi, sending his Vacaria over to crash into his teammates like a meat bullet simply wasn't going to happen. At this moment, Huang Xiaoshan wanted to follow up. Seeing that Wang Jixi was about to fall, he suddenly drew his sword and used a falling phoenix slash in order to knock down Vacaria. Wang Jixi had seen this coming. He could still move a bit in the air. He forced his broom to turn and his character swirled around like a snake. The broom attack of his had an extremely long range and, in an instant, it arrived before Huang Xiaoshan's falling phoenix slash. Huang Xiaoshan was also extremely good at adapting. As soon as he saw that his attack wasn't going to hit, he immediately changed to a guard and was knocked back by the broom attack. Suddenly, a pillar of light descended from the sky, enveloping Vacaria. The pillar of light crashed to the ground and then split into 6 smaller pillars of light. They swept across the field and even caught Han Wenqing and the other team 2 members in it. Everyone recognized that this was the launcher level 70 skill, satellite beam, which dealt tons of damage. Girls today really are quite violent, huh? Yu Wenzhou mumbled. Without a doubt, this satellite beam had been executed by Suma Cheng. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 343, Chapter 343. Satisfying conclusion. When this satellite beam came out, Team 2 finally fell into disorder. Wang Jixi's Vacaria had been caught directly in the middle of the beam. Let alone flying away, if he didn't get pressed to the ground, that would have already been considered quite impressive. Furthermore, the four revolving, smaller pillars disrupted the iron triangle formation. How could Huang Xiaoshan and Zhou Zekai miss this opportunity? They were on the same team as Sima Cheng, so they were immune to her skills. The satellite beam wouldn't do anything to them. As soon as Huang Xiaoshan's troubling rain landed on the ground, he used a triple slash to close in and make his way into the middle of the enemy team. Zhou Zekai's Cloud Piercer was even faster. He hadn't even arrived yet, and bullets were already being fired. Their two thoughts were one and the same. They wanted to seize this opportunity to take down Zhang Xinji's cleric. Clerics weren't good in combat. Without any support, dodging the satellite beam while facing the attacks from two gods, Zhang Xinji's play was as meticulous as ever, but he truly wasn't able to defend against the two of them. At the same time, when Yu Wenzhou saw that the enemy team was in disorder, he immediately used a high-level skill. He summoned chaotic rain, and the skies transformed into a field of chaotic black smoke, filled with evil intent. Anyone who saw the dark purple rain fall down would immediately feel disgusted by it. This chaotic rain's special effect was that there was a chance to confuse an enemy target inside the rain. Under the status effect, the character's movements could not be controlled, which was naturally very troublesome to deal with. Han Wenqing had originally planned on saving Zhang Xinji, but as soon as he saw this skill being used, he didn't dare go up and instead jumped out from the attack's range. But then, with a crash, Chu Yunxiu's elementalist summoned several ice walls in a straight line. She didn't explode them either. She was clearly trying to block him. Team 1's players didn't need any shot calling. They naturally coordinated together simply because it was too obvious what they needed to do. Their levels of tactical insight were all very high, so they all made the same decisions. The audience's applause never stopped. This year's All-Star competition simply had way too many highlights. Almost all of the All-Stars had their own astonishing moments, upping the intensity with each play. And this time, Sima Cheng's sudden gleam of light had turned into the deciding play. For a moment, Team 2's four players weren't able to find a way to fight back. Against Huang Xiaoshan's and Zhou Zekai's combined efforts, Zhang Xinji was finally unrescuable and became Team 2's third death in this battle. Now, the result was obvious. Zhang Xinji's cleric had originally been Team 2's biggest advantage. Now that they were at a numbers disadvantage and without their biggest advantage, their chances of winning were very low. Even worse, not a single player on Team 1 had yet to die. If they could last until the end, it would be a perfect victory, which would be quite embarrassing for Team 2's players. However, this was the all-star competition after all. At this point, if this were an official match, they would certainly continue fighting. But for this competition, they wouldn't take it as seriously. However, Team 2 had Han Wenqing. This veteran would never cower at any moment. From Team 1's perspective, they didn't want Team 2 to become too embarrassed, so they charged in and recklessly fought. In the end, Team 2 was finally wiped out, but Team 1 had also lost 3 characters, so there was no perfect victory. No one bickered about the end result. Both sides had played quite garishly. Even though no other high tide appeared, the excited atmosphere was still held. When Team 2's Han Wenqing's desert dust finally fell, the applause and cheers hit its peak. Many of Team 1's fans stood up, yelling the names of the players they supported. Without a doubt, the 2 words Zhou Zekai stood out the loudest. "Old Han, how fierce," Yu Wenzhou muttered again. Han Wenqing had fought till the very last moment. If Team 1 hadn't taken it seriously at the end, they might have been the ones wiped out. Amidst the crowd's applause and cheers, the 12 players came down from their booths and returned to the center, along with the other all-stars who had played in the individual and group competition. The electronic screen displayed the final point count. Team 1 had obtained the victory. Team 1's fans were happy and excited. But for Team 2, even though they knew that it didn't count for anything, it still didn't feel good to lose. In the end, the team representatives received interviews and Samsara's Joe Zekai went up once again. This was, after all, his team's home stadium. The questions asked in the interview were simply courtesy words. The match was amazing, the audience was great, this year's All-Star Weekend was successful, and he hoped he could come back again next year. With Joe Zekai's style, it had taken a lot of effort to get the answers out of him. It basically went like this. Did you find the match amazing or not? Yes. Did you find the crowd great or not? Great. What did you think of this year's All-Star Weekend? Very successful. What are your hopes for next time? That I can participate. And so on. Once the official part of the event was over, the rest was just an event where they gave out souvenirs, and there was no lack of souvenirs with the All-Stars' signatures on them. If this was in the past, Chen Guo would have risked her life to get Su Ma Cheng's signature. But now that she knew Ye Xiu's identity, Chen Guo felt a sense of superiority arise. This was because she was very clear that, with her relationship with Ye Xiu, getting Su Ma Cheng's signature wouldn't be difficult at all. As a result, she didn't feel pressed to get it. At the same time, her relationship with Ye Xiu also made it difficult for them to get out of the stadium. They were unexpectedly ambushed by a mob of reporters. As soon as they saw the two of them, they took out their pens, notepads, etc. and surrounded them. They were naturally there to ask about Ye Xiu's situation. Chen Guo had originally thought of simply replying with "I don't now." But Tang Ru stopped her and actually went up to politely respond to the reporter's questions. After hearing Tang Ru's replies, Chen Guo suddenly understood and sighed to herself. She had been way too careless. Saying, "I don't know" was the same as saying no comment to them. She clearly knew something, it was just that she wasn't going to say it. If she did that, the reporters would certainly begin to dig deeper. But with Tang Ru's replies, she didn't say that she didn't know anything. She simply avoided all of the important parts. The one part they did make up was that the two of them didn't know that he was Ye Xiu in the beginning. They had only sat together with him coincidentally and got to know him, thinking that he was just a normal audience member. This was quite believable. Let alone two normal audience members. If Ye Xiu had swaggered his way over to them, they wouldn't have known that he was Ye Xiu either. Helpless, the reporters could only ask if the two had any photos with him, which they naturally didn't. And then they asked if they could describe Ye Xiu's appearance, which came down to Chen Guo to answer. It wasn't because she was good at describing people, but rather it was because she was one of Ye Xiu's fans and had seen rumors of Ye Xiu's appearance on the internet. She simply took one of them and talked about it. As soon as they heard this, they saw that it matched with other reports in the past, so they didn't doubt it. By doing this, they were able to escape from the reporters. The two let out a sigh of relief. However, Tang Ru was clearly more vigilant than Chen Guo was. After escaping from their claws, she would look around from time to see if they had any dogs following them. Once she saw that there weren't any of these people, she finally relaxed and returned to the hotel with Chen Guo. Thus, the All-Star Weekend ended. At the hotel, Ye Xiu had already turned off the TV long ago, once he saw that the competition was over. When the two returned, he was sitting in front of the computer playing Glory. Chen Guo's excitement wouldn't die down so quickly. Now that she knew of Ye Xiu's identity, she would naturally want to hear a god's opinion. Su Ma Cheng's sudden display was the final deciding factor in the team competition. Ye Xiu picked a comment that Chen Guo would definitely want to hear. Sure enough, Chen Guo looked pleased with herself, as if she had gotten the piece of candy she had wanted. She then went to chat with Tang Ru. They had talked all the way until it was time to sleep. Then they shooed Ye Xiu out of their room and turned off the lights. The next day, they left the hotel early in the morning in order to catch their flight back. At the airport, Chen Guo looked around to see if they would coincidentally bump into any excellent era players. Even though Chen Guo no longer felt good about the club anymore, her support for Su Macheng wouldn't fade. As for whether she would be happy if excellent era lost, she still wasn't sure about this. She would feel bad because of Ye Xiu if she looked forward to them winning, but she would also feel bad because of Su Macheng if she looked forward to them losing. Though for this season, with the amount of points excellent era has, losing or winning doesn't really matter, right? On the plane, Chen Guo finally found something she could accept as a reason. Yeah, Ye Xiu nodded his head. After a complicated period since Sun Xiang joined the team, their records have turned around for the better and they were starting to rise up on the standings. However, they were simply too far behind now. If they wanted to make a comeback and make it into the playoffs, trying hard wouldn't be enough. The teams ahead of them would have to do poorly. Entering the playoffs was already nearly unachievable in theory. Excellent Era's fans were already talking about the next season and what their future would be then. On the internet, Glory's fans were currently focused on the discussion of this year's All-Star Weekend. From Day 1's Rookie Challenge to Day 2's events to Day 3's All-Star Competition, there were simply way too many topics to talk about. When Ye Xiu and the girls returned to Happy Internet Cafe, some of the more frequent customers looked at Chen Guo and Tang Ru like they were heroes of some sort. They were all Glory fans, so they would definitely watch the All-Star Weekend. The two going on stage on the second day made them very surprised. Seeing someone they knew on stage felt quite miraculous. Chen Guo easily accepted everyone's respects. Even after standing 8,000 meters up above everyone, her warmth never faded and she immediately began to chat with them. Lady Tang, how incredible! To think that you could actually beat a pro. In reality, they paid greater attention to Tang Ru. Normal players weren't as ambitious as Tang Ru. Beating a pro once was already amazing to them. Ha ha ha, of course there are talents in my internet cafe. Chen Guo wasn't jealous. She said it very happily. Though when she said this, she couldn't help but glance at Ye Xiu. But Ye Xiu had already snatched a computer station and was browsing the internet, not caring about their discussion in the slightest. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 344 Chapter 344. Chen Guo's determination. After chatting happily with the customers for a good while, the crowd eventually dispersed. A few of the more clever ones, who hadn't participated much earlier, stealthily snuck up after everyone left to talk to Chen Guo, surprising her. These customers had noticed that Chen Guo, Tang Ru, and Ye Xiu had gone to the all-star competition together. When Tang Ru was in a difficult situation, God Ye Xiu, who had come out to save her, seemed to be someone Tang Ru knew. From this, it was too easy putting two and two together. Chen Guo had already understood what their intent was before they finished speaking. Luckily, they had already experienced what it was like to be surrounded by reporters yesterday when the All-Star Weekend ended. Even those crafty reporters had been tricked. How could these customers compare to them? Although Tang Ru did most of the work, Chen Guo had still been a part of it. Using what Tang Ru had said yesterday, she sighed together with them, lamenting their chance to meet the god. As for Ye Xiu, in her eyes he was just her lackey. After dealing with those customers, Chen Guo still couldn't rest. After all, she hadn't been in the internet cafe for 3 days, and as the owner, there were still a few matters she had to take care of. She wasn't like Ye Xiu and Tang Ru, who could simply throw their luggage to one side after returning and immediately start playing. To be more accurate, only Tang Ru had thrown her luggage. Ye Xiu made a beeline for the computer as soon as he had arrived. He hadn't brought any luggage with him and went with them empty-handed. All of the toiletries he used were the ones provided by the hotel. As a result, he returned empty-handed as well. If she hadn't seen everything with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed that he had just come back from a trip. For the past 3 days, Ye Xiu and Tang Ru had gone on, but not for very long. Overall, not much had changed. The top guilds had taken Ye Xiu's guides for the level 40 3000 Waves Lake dungeon to level and compete for the records. Ye Xiu didn't care who got the final record. After getting online, he checked his friends list to see what everyone's levels were. Even though the All-Star weekend had been extremely exciting, the game had been very normal during those 3 days. But even if the players didn't go watch it live at the stadium, the majority of players would still watch it through the broadcast. Because of this, the leveling speed during those 3 days was a bit slower. On his friends list, those from the top guilds had all leveled to 41. As for Steamed Bun Invasion and Concealed Light, they were still pitifully climbing at level 32 and 33. In the Christmas event, the players who hadn't been in Sin City had been tossed far away. Even worse, Steamed Bun Invasion hadn't participated in that event whatsoever. Caio Yiffin's 1-inch Ash was doing better than Steamed Bun Invasion, though. Ye Xiu saw that he was still online, so he messaged him. However, the system informed him that it was rejected. Caio Yiffin had been in City S the entire time. There was no way he had the time to level, which meant that he had handed it over for someone to level it for him. With his background as a pro player, Caio Yiffin didn't need to learn and understand the game starting from zero like Tang Ru and Steamed Bun Invasion. Simply getting a max-level account and slowly studying it would be the same. It was just that Caio Yiffin wanted to learn from God, which was why he made 1-inch Ash. But because he missed the Christmas event opportunity, he had no choice but to find someone to level it for him. And since their levels were higher, the difference in experience was greater, and it was already difficult for him to catch up. Seeing this, Ye Xiu saw that they wouldn't be able to play together for now. As a result, only he and Tang Ru went to dungeon together. The huge gap in levels due to the Christmas event hadn't shrunk much during these 3 days. The players from the top guilds, who had always been ahead of them, pulled ahead a bit more and were now all at 1000 Waves Lake. Because of this, Sin City was very empty. There weren't even any signs of ghosts at the dungeon entrance when the two entered. The two of them were quite familiar with the dungeon and directly finished their 3 runs of the day. By the time they were done, Chen Guo finished dealing with her matters and logged into the game as well. Ye Xiu casually glanced at her screen and saw that the first thing she did after logging in was leaving her guild. "You're leaving your guild?" Ye Xiu asked. "Yeah." Chen Guo nodded her head. "Excellent dynasty," Ye Xiu said. "Yeah, they're disgusting," Chen Guo said. Chen Guo was clearly disgusted by Club Excellent Era now. Their guild Excellent Dynasty no longer made her feel proud either. She decisively left the guild without any signs of reluctance. Apart from this, she also felt worried for Sima Cheng. It was as if she thought Sima Cheng was in some sort of prison. "Do you really need to go that far?" Ye Xiu laughed, seeing what Chen Guo was thinking. "I'll make my own guild," Chen Guo said while replying back to messages. She had been in Excellent Dynasty for a long time, so she had a lot of friends there. Her leaving the guild even before saying hi to them caused a lot of her friends to ask her what was going on. "Excellent Era is rotten. I'm going to make my own guild." Chen Guo replied in this way to everyone. Her friends who received them were confused. They were doing just fine. What did she mean Excellent Era was rotten? "Sis, is it because of Sun Xiang?" Her friends began guessing. Sun Xiang's performance in the All-Star competition truly was too embarrassing. Sun Xiang losing to their rival Han Wenqing made a lot of Excellent Era's fans unhappy. To their understanding of her, such a shameful event really was enough to make her leave impulsively. "No," Chen Guo concluded. "In any case, I don't want to be in this lame guild. Who wants to join me?" For a moment, very few replied back. Developing a guild in the heavenly domain wasn't easy. Here, The competition was crueler and fiercer. The benefits from joining a top guild like Excellent Dynasty couldn't be compared to those on their own or those in a regular guild. In the Heavenly Domain, the top guilds weren't only seeking for more numbers like the new server. The qualifications needed to enter one were much higher. In order to join a top guild in the Heavenly Domain, the player needed to have a certain level of skill. Many of them cherished their status. In addition, those who joined the guild were all supporters of Excellent Era. Their guild, Excellent Dynasty, also had an emotional aspect to it. This sort of loyalty wasn't something normal guilds had. Plus, Chen Guo didn't give a concrete reason to. She simply left for seemingly no reason and then just asked if they wanted to join. Of course they weren't going to respond. If they agreed, then that'd be too careless. If they didn't agree, it wouldn't be good for Chen Guo's reputation. For a moment, they pretended they were dead as if they didn't receive any messages. Some of them even logged out of the game. Only her most ironclad friends replied back, wanting to know why Chen Guo wanted to do so. These were the friends Chen Guo trusted the most in game, so she didn't hide anything, directly revealing to them why she didn't feel good about Excellent Era. Her friends hadn't even replied back yet when Ye Xiu said in surprise, "You know a lot." Chen Guo had told her friends about all those things she and Tang Ru had analyzed that night, the guesses they had made about Club Excellent Era. And now that Ye Xiu showed his surprise, Chen Guo turned his head to ask, "Is it like that?" Ye Xiu forced a smile. HMPH. Chen Guo's displeasure was obviously aimed at Club Excellent Era. To her friends, these speculations were too shocking. They couldn't accept them so easily. "You say Ye Qiu's condition had been declining. Did you see that dragon raises its head in the all-star competition?" Chen Guo asked. "Right, he can still use dragon raises its head. Declining, my ass. It really is Excellent Era scheming," one of Chen Guo's die-hard friends shouted. This player was also one of Ye Qiu's loyal fans. He was able to accept it very easily like Chen Guo. "That, you couldn't have made so many speculations just because of one dragon raises its head, right?" Of course, some of them were more prudent. Truthfully, this was the more logical decision. The previous player had been a brainless fan like Chen Guo and had an easier time accepting news that favored his idol. HMPH, there's more, but I won't tell you. Anyways, it's like that. I've already left. I'm going to create a guild and overthrow Excellent Dynasty, Chen Guo said. Ridiculous. Ye Xiu suddenly blurted out. Chen Guo immediately turned her head to glare at him. The determination glinting in her eyes frightened Ye Xiu. Even though boss Chen Guo was usually all ominous towards him, Ye Xiu had never seen this sort of determination from her. Topple Excellent Dynasty. Is she serious? Truthfully, for a top guild like Excellent Dynasty, someone like Ye Xiu could cause trouble for them in the new server. But to actually topple them was something even Ye Xiu didn't dare think of. After all, the guild was a very important part of the club's business. This was because the Glory Pro Alliance and the game weren't completely separate. No matter how good the pro players' accounts were, they were still linked to an account card like everybody else's. In addition, upgrading their equipment and improving their skills required in-game materials, experience, and skill points. The creation of the guild in-game could be considered as a safeguard for the pro teams, especially for providing materials. They might be able to set the development of the guild back like what Ye Xiu was doing in the 10th server, but if they were ever in danger of being destroyed, how could the club just sit back and watch? When that time came, the in-game guilds would ask their pros to help, and the pros would come to set things right again. It wasn't as if this had never happened before. Pros participating in the battles because of the competition between guilds had happened many times in Glory's history, especially after the creation of the Heavenly Domain. After all, the Heavenly Domain was a place where all the high-level accounts gathered together. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 345 Chapter 345 The first step in development. It's good that you're determined. But your goal really is a bit impractical. After a brief moment of shock from Chen Guo's determination, Ye Xiu returned to his usual calm self. HMPH, I know that. I'm just saying that this is my goal, Chen Guo said. Good luck, Ye Xiu said. You're still planning on coming out of retirement, right? Chen Guo asked. Ye Xiu nodded his head. When you come out of retirement, don't tell me you're going back to excellent era. That's probably not going to happen. Ye Xiu forced a smile. How about forming your own team? Chen Guo suddenly said, That's actually a great idea. Were you planning on doing this from the start? Chen Guo asked. I've been thinking about it, Ye Xiu said. If your goal in forming a team is to get into the Pro Alliance, then that's going to require a lot of investment, Chen Guo said. Ye Xiu nodded his head. Players, money to register for the Alliance, a stadium. Chen Guo began counting with her fingers. Wow, you seem to understand a lot, Ye Xiu said. I've been thinking about it. Chen Guo repeated what Ye Xiu said. Starting yesterday or from the day before, Ye Xiu easily saw through her. Chen Guo could only have thought of doing this after knowing Ye Xiu's identity. With how much she knew, she probably learned all about it during these past 2 days. What? Is there something wrong with that? Chen Guo didn't feel embarrassed in the slightest. Aren't you a bit impulsive? Of course not, Chen Guo said. I've thought about it very carefully. It'll still take around a year before you can come out of retirement. During that time, we can start to prepare for it. That'll require you to put up your savings, Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo's only property was Happy Internet Cafe. Ye Xiu had been working there for some time, so he had an idea on the cafe's income. Having been in a pro team for so many years, Ye Xiu also had an idea on what a pro team needed. That wasn't something that Chen Guo's internet cafe could provide. Their initial investment would definitely require Chen Guo's savings. As for how much the boss had, Ye Xiu didn't know. You don't need to worry about that. Right now, as the boss, I appoint you as the team captain. Chen Guo lifted her head high. What? It's been created just like that? Ye Xiu was astonished. Yup, this historic moment has to be recorded. Come here, smile. Chen Guo suddenly took out her phone. Hey, Ye Xiu didn't have time to object. Chen Guo swiftly pressed near. Tang Ru had also snuck her head in. The camera flashed, and just like that the photo was taken. Don't worry, I won't spread it around. Chen Guo laughed and carefully stored the photo. Ye Xiu turned his head and stared at Tang Ru, who had suddenly snuck into the scene. Captain, Tang Ru saluted. When did you two think of this? Ye Xiu was speechless. You don't need to worry about that, Chen Guo said. In short, the team's been created. We 3 are the first members of the team. Ye Xiu looked at the 2 of them. After a brief moment of silence, he looked at Chen Guo. You should be the boss, as a player, cough. I'll just be in there until you get enough players, Chen Guo angrily said. Ye Xiu was obviously trying to say that she simply wasn't good enough to be a player. Chen Guo obviously knew this. Plus, with her age, there wasn't enough time for her to get any better. In the team, she could only be the manager. As for being a player, at best, she could take it up nominally as a sort of comfort. Okay, now that the team's been created, the first thing you 2 need to do is hurry up and level up. Then we'll group up in the heavenly domain. While you guys are doing that, I'll create a guild and wait for you guys. Our development starts with the guild, Chen Guo commanded in a serious tone. Can I ask what this team will be called? Ye Xiu asked. Of course it'll be called Happy, Chen Guo replied instantly. Ye Xiu didn't say anything and turned his head to continue playing. Do you have any objections? Chen Guo asked. No, I just wanted to know, Ye Xiu said. Truthfully, he didn't care what the name was. Chen Guo's decision to set up a team seemed to be real, but he also felt that it seemed a bit out of nowhere, so Ye Xiu didn't bother thinking about it too much. He'll just see how things go first before making any real decisions. In any case, it's not like they could really do anything right now. After the days go by, he'll see if boss Chen Guo was actually serious or not. After talking, Chen Guo's friends finally responded. In the end, only one fan of Ye Xiu left excellent dynasty with Chen Guo. As for the others, they just laughed as if it was all a big joke. Chen Guo wasn't going to force them. Having one already made her feel thankful. She immediately introduced her friend to Ye Xiu. Forest landscape. Battle mage. His mechanics aren't bad, they're just a bit worse than mine. Chen Guo said. Just a bit worse than yours, Ye Xiu repeated. That tone doesn't suit you. In the past, there was no way Chen Guo could bear this sort of mocking tone. But now, even though she couldn't bear it, she had to. Because she finally knew who he was. A god looking down on her skill was completely reasonable. As a result, Chen Guo could only take a deep breath and pretend she didn't hear it. She continued, "Right now, it's just us two. We can't create a guild yet. We'll need more people." "Yeah." Ye Xiu nodded his head. It wasn't easy creating a guild in the heavenly domain. There weren't any new players. In order to enter the heavenly domain, everyone that was there had to have a certain level of mechanics and skill. Those who wanted to join a guild would have already done so back when they were in their normal server. Finding people to join a new guild in the heavenly domain would prove to be quite difficult. Usually, guilds were first created in the normal server. Then, once everyone reached level 70 and entered the heavenly domain, they would then create a guild in the heavenly domain. The two guilds would then set up a link. After that link was created, guild players that were able to enter the heavenly domain from the normal player server would directly join the guild with the same name. Directly creating a guild in the heavenly domain would require the creator to have a certain amount of appeal, or it could be achieved through spending money. For appeal, Chen Guo's circle of friends were all from excellent dynasty. With excellent eras backing behind excellent dynasty, they had who knew how much more appeal over Chen Guo's new guild. Pro characters like One Autumn Leaf and Dancing Rain all had their names registered under excellent dynasty in the heavenly domain. Members of the guild could easily search up the entire team's pro characters. As for money, that was a bottomless pit. In addition, those who joined would only be there while there were still advantages, so Chen Guo didn't want to use this method. "Hey, can I use your name?" Chen Guo asked Ye Xiu. "As if others would believe you," Ye Xiu said. That's true, Chen Guo thought. She didn't have any fame, but Ye Xiu was different. If she used Ye Xiu's name, creating a guild wouldn't be a problem. The problem was that no one would believe her. Glory had been going on for a long time. Cheating people by lying about their identity had been done who knew how many times. If she said that she was some pro player, the only thing she'd summon would be an angry mob. Chen Guo thought and thought, but she couldn't come up with anything. Let alone her. Even if Ye Xiu personally came out, the players would still be doubtful. This was already a type of taboo in Glory. Even if I created one in the normal server, it'd still be troublesome. I'm in an old server, so there aren't many new players. Chen Guo sighed. Her Chasing Haze was in the 5th server. It had already been several years since its creation. "Oh, I've got it. You create the guild in the 10th server," Chen Guo suddenly said. "I create it." Ye Xiu stared blankly. "Yeah, creating a guild in a new server shouldn't be hard," Chen Guo said. "That's true," Ye Xiu said while staring at his character. Lord Grimm. With his character's fame, creating a guild would be way too easy. His fame was simply incomparable. New servers would have a lot of young and naive new players. Players like Tang Ru, who had never touched Glory before without any knowledge of the guilds backed by pros, would only know that in the 10th server Lord Grimm was number 1. "Hurry, hurry, hurry up and create it," Chen Guo urged. "Okay." Ye Xiu nodded his head. To create a team, if they wanted to develop it into a business, then an in-game guild was a requirement. Creating a guild right now was perfect. They could take advantage of being in the new server to snatch resources. It would be their first step for their future. As a result, Ye Xiu sent out a message in the global chat that he would be creating a guild to test out what the response would be like. There had been a long period of peace after the Christmas event. Suddenly, Lord Grim came out with a bang and flung a heavy explosive. The global chat immediately erupted into chaos. His friends list also began flashing repeatedly. It was currently Monday afternoon. Nearly everyone online right now on his friends list were from the top guilds. All of them sent him messages in order to pry out more information. For these top guilds, Lord Grim creating his own guild was absolutely terrible news. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 346 Chapter 346 Beaten Black and Blue. Lord Grim was going to create a guild. When the news came, the top guilds spread the word at top speed to their core circles. Those who weren't online at that moment all received notifications through their phones. Even those who had been tucked in bed all nice and sound were immediately wide awake after hearing this news. This wasn't small news, especially to those who were competing for the dungeon records. If Lord Grim actually created his own guild, he would certainly have the strength to compete with them for the dungeon records. And with Lord Grim's fame in the 10th server, it would be extremely easy for him to create a very powerful guild. Even if the players who joined weren't good, they would still be able to support their dungeon team. The guilds backed by clubs had an innate advantage. However, at the same time, they also had restrictions placed on them because of their clubs. This was because their guilds could be considered as the clubs and the team's in-game representative. These guilds had to work hard to create a perfect image for themselves. Some of their more dubious activities couldn't be exposed to the public. For example, their great chase after Lord Grim. That was already a fairly risky maneuver by the top guilds. During the chasing, the reason their players didn't wear their guild names was because they didn't want the 10th server players to see who they were. However, Lord Grim's skill and capabilities were something everyone thoroughly understood. Even their large-scale mobilization hadn't been as successful as they had hoped. Sending a few unorganized soldiers to bother them would only be sending them to their deaths. What do we do? Everyone was worrying over this question. Amongst these, the three great guilds were having the most trouble. Currently, the three great guilds and excellent dynasty knew what Lord Grim's true identity was. In addition, they had all watched the All-Star Weekend's broadcast. Ye Xiu had used Dragon Rays as its head, a move that Han Wenking said could only be done by Ye Xiu, and had received widespread acknowledgement for it. But they wouldn't have expected that Ye Xiu's starting point for coming out of retirement would begin in the 10th server. Creating a guild would be a very heavy blow to these top guilds. As for those slightly weaker guilds, even though they also yearned for dungeon records, it could be seen from the results that those records mainly stayed in the control of a few guilds. Lord Grim jumping in to add to the mess would definitely cause these top guilds to be filled with distraught. In addition, they knew that Lord Grim definitely wasn't someone that they could mess with. But for those who didn't know Lord Grim's identity, they all had false hopes. For example, when Misty Castle's Hazy Mist saw that Lord Grim was interested in playing in a guild, he immediately asked him if he wanted to join theirs. But in the end, Ye Xiu politely declined. Hazy Mist had even thought that it was because his offer hadn't been enticing enough and was pondering what to do next. Guild like the three great guilds and excellent dynasty, who knew the truth, completely gave up on trying to rope him in. Blue River ran to the heavenly domain to report to his guild leader, Changing Spring. Excellent Dynasty's Chen Yehui, on the other hand, uneasily went looking for Vice Captain Liu Hao. Herb Garden's Plantago Seed had kept his distance after finding out Lord Grim's identity and would only come out when there was a good opportunity. His plan was still the same, so he didn't say anything. Tyrannical Ambitions Cold Knight directly went to contact Ye Xiu. Cold Knight wanted to cry, but no tears came out. The 10th server's pioneering turned out to be so unexpectedly difficult. This time, The person who was making things difficult for them was unbelievably strong. Cold Knight already felt that he wasn't a worthy opponent, but he still had to give it a try. God is going to create a guild, huh? Congratulations, congratulations. Even Cold Knight himself felt that his greeting sounded fake. How could he have any sort of feelings of congratulation in his heart? But aside from this, he didn't know how else to initiate a conversation. Thanks, Ye Xiu replied simply. He had too many messages to attend to. Do you have enough manpower? If there isn't enough, I can send over some help. Cold Knight continued with his fakeness. No need, Ye Xiu replied. There was even a smiley face attached to it. Cold Knight couldn't find any other words to say. After pondering for a while, he decided to ask the question on his mind directly. God, what do you plan on doing after creating your guild? Ha ha, you should understand, Ye Xiu replied. Of course, Cold Knight understood. With the subject at hand, he immediately reminded, God, you haven't forgotten our deal, right? Of course, I remember. We won't touch your guild's records. Cold Knight quickly received Lord Grimm's reply. His promise was the same as the one he had initially made. He even added the same straightforward emoticon face he had used back then. Though when he saw this reply, Cold Knight wasn't as happy as he was that day. Not touching their guild's records wasn't enough. This was because if Lord Grimm didn't provide their guild with guides, their guild would have no way of competing for the records. When that happened, even if Lord Grimm wanted to touch their records, he wouldn't be able to. The promise they had happily received seemed like insignificant words now. At that time, it wasn't as if they hadn't thought about the traps that came with the promise. However, Lord Grimm's levels had always been lower than theirs. As long as they controlled the records before he got to that level, then they would be fine. They hadn't thought that he would create dungeon guides. Cold Knight didn't know what to say. In theory, Lord Grimm hadn't broken his promise. Heavenly Domain. After Blue Brook Guild's changing spring heard Blue River's news, all he could do was sigh. Blue Brook Guild's 5 great experts were in a circle together. For a short while, they didn't know what to say. The news of Lord Grimm creating a guild was the same as if it were going to rain. No one could do anything to stop it. If it was just a normal expert creating a guild, they wouldn't be as worried. However, the one creating the guild was God Ye Xiu. He had burst out during the All-Star competition and confirmed his identity with Dragon Raises Its Head. Because of this, his purpose for creating a guild obviously wasn't going to be simply for fun. His goal would be the same as the guilds backed by the clubs. Competing against each other couldn't be avoided. We'll wait and see what happens before we take action. In the end, Changing Spring could only give this suggestion. Club Excellent Era. This time, Chen Yehui didn't try to reach Liu Hao by phone and instead personally went to pay him a visit. After the All-Star weekend, Liu Hao felt as if his heart had been stabbed. Ye Xiu's Dragon Raises Its Head had defeated Samsara's Du Ming. However, it had also left a deep traumatic impression on Liu Hao. Ye Xiu was going to return. This was what many people, the pros, the media, and the fans, deciphered. And this was certainly not what Liu Hao wanted to see. At this time of uneasiness, Chen Yehui suddenly came looking for him and delivered the news of Lord Grimm creating a guild. Creating a guild, Liu Hao obviously understood the relationship between a guild and a club. Ye Xiu showed that he intended to come out of retirement. Him creating a guild would implicate. Could he be trying to form his own team? It's possible, Chen Yehui said. So he refuses to give up, huh? Liu Hao sneered. Chen Yehui felt a bit strange. When he entered the room, he saw that Liu Hao's expression was somewhat gloomy, but after hearing this news, he seemed to have relaxed. Does he really think that he can form his own team with his own hands and expect to compete with teams like ours, who have such deep roots? It seems to me like he's grown senile, Liu Hao said. With the alliance nowadays, it's no longer the era where it's possible to carry a team by yourself. Experts are flooding in. More and more god-level accounts are appearing. The competition is even fiercer than ever before. It seems to me like he'll have trouble even finding the qualifications to enter the alliance." Liu Hao laughed out loud. "So you're saying that I don't need to worry about him?" Chen Yehui asked. "Yeah, but don't completely ignore him. Continue to keep an eye out," Liu Hao said. "But with his new guild, our development in the 10th server will definitely face a huge obstacle." Chen Yehui was holding less and less hope for Liu Hao. He discovered that the two were gradually growing further and further apart. The two sides were no longer concerned about the same thing. Liu Hao only felt that Ye Xiu wouldn't be able to rise back up, but during the course of all this, their excellent dynasty's development would certainly take a hit, yet it didn't even seem like that sort of thought had come across his mind. Chen Yehui knew that the guild's development was his responsibility. Liu Hao had nothing to do with it. He only wanted to see, one last time, if his former ally had truly cut ties off with him. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 347 Chapter 347 Guild created. Chen Yehui's tone of voice changed, carrying more toughness and doubt. This was very different from how he usually talked with Liu Hao, who was able to tell. Liu Hao was also someone who thought hard, and he was instantly able to tell why Chen Yehui wasn't happy. He patted Chen Yehui and smiled. "Let's go find a place to drink. We can take our time to talk things over when we're there." Liu Hao didn't want to lose his ally. Chen Yehui understood this, so he didn't object. Thus, the two left together. In the game, seeing the craze brought out by Lord Grimm's announcement, the players didn't doubt that Lord Grimm's guild might quickly be the largest in the 10th server. After the announcement came out, quite a few players had already begun paying close attention to the guild page, waiting to see when Lord Grimm's guild would be created. However, even after the day turned dark, there was no sign of Lord Grimm's name in the new guild's list. In order to create a guild, the guild leader would present an application, and 30 players would have to respond. If the guild was created, the players who responded would naturally become the first guild members. 30 players was the minimum amount of players required to create a guild. If the guild had less than 30 players, the guild would enter a 72-hour countdown. If the amount of players stayed below 30 after these 72 hours were up, then the guild would automatically be disbanded. Oftentimes, when guilds were created, the guild leader had to try and find some way to get 30 players to respond. However, with Lord Grimm's fame, let alone 30 players, finding 300 players to join wouldn't be hard. What everyone was worried about was whether or not they'd be able to get a spot. This was because once 30 players joined, the guild would be automatically created, and there would be no chance to respond to the application. After this period, if they wanted to join, they would have to request the guild for an invite and wait for the guild members to approve. Usually in a guild's initial period, if the guild didn't have much fame, numbers were more important. The more players, the better, but after the guild was developed, players would be filtered and quality would be more important. However, Lord Grimm's guild wouldn't be going according to the usual scenario. He had fame, and he didn't need numbers to create a presence for himself. He could completely skip the first step and regard quality as more important. Because of this, being able to respond as one of the first 30 players was more valuable. Unfortunately, Lord Grimm didn't seem to show any signs of acting after making the announcement. The players were puzzled and in doubt, but at night, during the peak hours, Lord Grimm sent out the application, and his guild suddenly popped up on the new guild's list. In just that instant, the players who found out didn't even have time to spread the news when the application disappeared. This was because, in that instant, 30 players had already responded, and the guild was automatically created. It was only after the announcement of the guild's creation was made by the system that the players noticed. Happy. the name of the guild Lord Grimm created. Players began to request invites one after the other, while trying to figure out the meaning behind the name. The name truly didn't sound tyrannical, and it didn't sound very impressive either. No one was able to deduce the true meaning behind it. In the end, they just regarded it as an expert having a different temperament than normal players. The attention garnered from Guild Happy made Chen Guo uncontrollably excited. In her eyes, this was an extremely impressive opening. Right now, Ye Xiu was dealing with the countless requests. Seeing the mass of names, Chen Guo only regretted that they couldn't accept them all. The limit of guild members depended upon the guild's level. Level 1 guilds could only house a maximum of 100 players. Excluding the first 30 players who responded, only 70 spots were left. Ye Xiu bitterly searched through the endless list of requests for players he was familiar with. Tang Ru, steamed bun invasion. They didn't need to be said. Apart from them, old friends like Seven Fields, Sleeping Moon, and Co. decisively left their full moon guild and requested for an invite after knowing that Brother Expert had created a guild. Cleansing Mist. After Ye Xiu singled out the name, Chen Guo was shocked. She quickly reacted. Is that Suma Cheng? Yeah, Ye Xiu nodded his head. Sigh, Chen Guo hated how she couldn't play with them in the 10th server and couldn't help but feel envious of how Tang Ru played shoulder to shoulder and chatted every day with Suma Cheng. Will she join our team in the future? Chen Guo asked. That depends on you. You're the boss. I don't have the money. Chen Guo was sad. She couldn't afford to pay a popular player like Suma Cheng. With her status, creating a pro team was definitely risky business. It was very likely that they wouldn't be able to last long in the alliance and would be quickly eliminated. Though luckily, with Ye Xiu, she had a lot more confidence. If she had to manage everything herself, she knew very well that their only result would be walking out. Ha ha, take it slow. It's still early. Ye Xiu was still laughing. Would Suma Cheng drop down a level just to join our team? Chen Guo's mind was in shambles. With Ye Xiu, this was a possibility. However, she felt too embarrassed to ask him to do that, so she could only silently hope. Okay, I've added everyone I know. Ye Xiu looked at this guild member list and checked again. Everyone he knew had been added in. The guild channel was bustling with noise. The newly gathered players seized the moment to get to know each other. Those who had gotten in by being the first to respond but were low-level were feeling very uneasy. Seeing the long list of high-level players in the guild, these noobs were worried that they'd immediately be kicked out. There's still space. Keep on adding people. Chen Guo saw that Ye Xiu had stopped after adding all the players he recognized. Don't worry, let's not act impulsively. Let me see who I want in my guild, Ye Xiu said. The high-level ones, Chen Guo said. It'd be best to consider their classes. If my guild has 100 clerics, that wouldn't be good, right? Ye Xiu laughed. Oh, Chen Guo understood what Ye Xiu was thinking. Are you thinking of having the classes in the guild work together as a team? I don't think I can get them to that level, but having a relatively good balance has its advantages. Ye Xiu said the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 348, Chapter 348. New players hearing what Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo didn't say anything more. She simply sat there and quietly watched Ye Xiu work. Ye Xiu made a count of the levels and classes of everyone who had joined, and then began skimming over the list of invite requests. Happy was currently a level 1 guild, and could only have a maximum of 100 players. There were 24 classes in Glory. In addition, some classes chose different paths, so they would have a very different style. For example, for Ghost Blades, Sword Demons and Phantom Demons could be considered two different types of classes. Another example would be Elementalists. They had access to Ice, Fire, Light, and Dark element skills, but usually players would choose two elements to focus on. The number of variations they had were even more than Ghost Blades. These types of variations couldn't be seen through merely by checking a character's level and class. Thus, Ye Xiu could only consider the composition of the guild members as a whole. After Ye Xiu was clear on the class composition the guild currently had, he began carefully accepting requests. New members continued to pour into Happy, but in the end, Ye Xiu didn't add it to max capacity. This was because Seven Fields, Sleeping Moon and their group had just left Full Moon Guild. If they wanted to join another guild, they would have to wait 5 days, so Ye Xiu left them a spot. Though for ambitious guilds, 5 days was enough time to level up the guild. Guild members could receive all sorts of guild quests. When they completed these quests, the guild would gain experience. When the experience reached 100%, they would level up. With every level up, the guild's maximum capacity would increase, and they would unlock more guild quests and rewards. When the guild reached level 5, the guild could choose to acquire a guardian. There were different kinds of guardians, but the most common choice was the stat guardian, which increased the guild player's stats. From level 5 onwards, the guardian would gain 1 level for every 5 levels the guild gained. Players who didn't want to be involved in guild matters would join guilds because of the stat increase from the guardian. Top guilds also had stronger guardians because their guild levels were higher. In the heavenly domain, the top guilds backed by clubs all had their guilds at the level limit, level 100, and as a result, they had a level 20 guardian. As for normal guilds, they weren't like guilds backed by clubs, who could easily reach the limit by taking in their fans. In addition, their members weren't as cohesive or loyal. For these normal guilds, once their development reached a certain stage, there would always be problems popping up because of their large numbers, which would cause the guild to either crumble away or be stuck and unable to progress. Only a very small number of normal guilds were able to grow large and powerful and reach the level of those guilds backed by clubs. However, in terms of influence, there was still no way that they could compete with the guilds backed by clubs. Guild Happy was just starting. The guild had a long way to go before reaching the top, although their starting point could be considered to be quite good. They were only limited by the maximum capacity set because they were still a level 1 guild. If not, then with Lord Grimm's fame, who knew how many players he could have got to join. Guild Happy's invite request was incredibly long. Even top guilds backed by clubs like Herb Garden and Blue Brook Guild didn't have that type of momentum. The entire reason the top guilds were fighting for the dungeon records were to have the sort of status Lord Grimm had in the player base's eyes. The craze brought by Guild Happy showed exactly why these dungeon records were so important to developing guilds. Ye Xiu finished choosing the members. Right now, the around 90 players were all online and were all extremely excited to be there. The chat in the guild channel was a complete storm. The players were already beginning to get together. Some were shouting to go to the arena, some were calling people to dungeon together, some were asking others to help them finish a difficult quest. Ye Xiu really wanted to say something to the guild, but he was having trouble finding a good opportunity to do so. "Hello, hello," Ye Xiu typed. He then followed up with a giant wall of emoticons to instantly clear the screen. Everyone else's messages disappeared. Their entire screen was filled with Lord Grimm's name as well as a bunch of random emoticons. The guild members were shocked and immediately quieted down. "How many of you have just started playing Glory?" Ye Xiu asked. A bunch of replies came out, and in an instant Ye Xiu was unable to find his question anymore. He could only make a guess based on how fast the messages were scrolling down. It was practically 100%. Ye Xiu wasn't surprised at this result. If they were old Glory players, then in the new server pioneering stage, they probably ran over to join the top guilds, which were backed by clubs. Joining these guilds in the new server wasn't very hard, or they might have been like Seven Fields and Sleeping Moon, who came to the new server together as friends and would have already decided on a guild to join beforehand. When he made the announcement, those who were able to request an invite were the stragglers who weren't in a guild, and the probability that they were new players was very high. Seeing all of these new players, Ye Xiu switched how he would speak. Our guild has been created, but because it's only level 1, we can only have 100 players max, so a lot of players who wanted to join weren't able to join. In the guild, everyone can take guild quests. The rewards aren't bad, and after completing one, the guild will get a certain amount of experience, helping the guild to level up. Only when the guild levels up will more people be allowed in. From level 5 onwards, we can have a guardian that'll help increase our strength. Sure enough, this sort of very basic knowledge of guilds was new stuff for these new players. After hearing Ye Xiu speak, quite a few were asking where to get the quests from. For content they had never touched before, new players were always filled with curiosity. They immediately called out to each other to do the guild quests together. The enthusiasm towards the guild's development was enough to make any guild leader shed a tear. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 349. Chapter 349. Rapid growth, getting from level 1 to 2, would always be the easiest. After about half of the guild quests in the first wave were completed, Guild Happy reached level 2. As long as a player sent a request for an invite, the player would always remain on the request list, unless the player suddenly joined a different guild, in which case the player would be automatically deleted from the request list. When the guild hit level 2, Ye Xiu opened up the request list and accepted another batch of members. In the blink of an eye, Guild Happy was now an almost 200-player guild. The second wave of players acted pretty much the same way as the first wave. After the guild leader explained the basic information about guilds, they enthusiastically ran off to start doing quests. Level up, add. Guild Happy rapidly developed in this way. The system would also make an announcement whenever a guild leveled up. The quick leveling only made everyone more excited, and with the endless list of requests, the guild was guaranteed to reach its maximum capacity with each level up. More and more players began bearing the Guild Happy tag, and soon, the entire Glory continent had players rushing to do guild quests. All of those big guilds saw the scene. The system making announcements one after another made them feel extremely envious. If the normal guilds felt envious, then what would the guilds backed by clubs be feeling? In their eyes, Guild Happy had already become one of their competitors. Seeing their rapid development, saying that their members all had low levels as comforting words wouldn't change anything. They had to take steps to do something about it. The guilds backed by clubs had differences as well. For these types of difficult situations, the majority of guilds were used to waiting and seeing what the three great guilds would do, but this time, the three great guilds showed no signs of movement. The guilds discussed amongst themselves. They knew that Lord Grimm had contested with the three great guilds before. Herb Garden could be said to have gotten away lucky, while Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition had taken a severe blow. Right now, they were at the level 40 stage. In the other servers, they were great guilds with powerful influence. But now, not only were they unable to make a name for themselves, they were struggling to defend their reputation. Their pioneering in 10th server had failed quite miserably. The other guilds weren't doing much better either. This was because the momentum during the early stages had been stolen away by Lord Grimm. They were only doing better than Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition. Not only were those two guilds not progressing, they were actually declining. Could they be scared? Many of the guilds, who liked to see what the three great guilds would do, had these sort of thoughts. However, they didn't know that the reason the three guilds weren't moving was precisely because they knew just how strong Lord Grimm was. They couldn't help but be cautious. The guild leaders from the three great guilds had actually already convened to discuss what to do. The three leaders weren't the 10th server guild leaders either, but rather the real bosses of the three great guilds. Blue Brook Guild's Changing Spring, Tyrannical Ambitions Jiangyu, and Herb Gardens Arasima. The 10th server's pioneering had frightened these top guilds. Even worse, with them there, their statuses were nothing compared to the opponent they were facing. "Sai, what should we do?" Changing Spring took a random 10th server account to use and met up with the other two. They could only watch as announcement after announcement came, telling them of Guild Happy's level-ups. Their hearts were filled with anxiety. Right now, dealing with Lord Grimm isn't the issue. Our issue is disrupting their guild's growth, Jiang Yu said fiercely. He really hated the guy, whether that be because of his support for his team or because of the several defeats by Lord Grimm's hands. No SHT. The biggest problem now is how are we going to disrupt their progress, Arasima said. Silence. If they had a plan, they wouldn't have had to gather together to discuss. Kill them and strike terror in their hearts, Jiang Yu said. It's useless. We can't fight them directly. How many open accounts do you guys have in the new server? At most 20, right? Right now, their guild already has 400 players. With the number of accounts at our disposal, what good would that do? Changing Spring said. And if we do that, it'd be very easy for them to guess that it was us, no, Arasima said. What to do? Jiang Yu was bitter. Since they were backed by a club, they had a reputation to maintain, which restricted them from openly attacking others without reason. And maybe we can send some of our open accounts to other guilds and have those guilds clash with Lord Grimm's, Arasima said. Maybe it'd be better to just directly plant spies into Lord Grimm's guild and stir up trouble from within, Jiang Yu said. How could it be that easy? Changing Spring bitterly laughed. Don't forget who we're up against. What type of tricks has he not seen before? Planting spies into Happy to stir up trouble won't work. Planting spies into other guilds to cause trouble might work, though. When Lord Grimm created his guild, a lot of players may have left their guilds to join his instead. There will be a lot of guilds with open spots. Let's consider using these guilds to cause trouble. As long as we can make Guild Happy an enemy of other guilds, we'll have good reason to wage war on them. Changing Spring analyzed. We can still send some spies over to Happy and sit there temporarily. When a conflict breaks out, they'll stir up fire from the inside, Jiang Yu said. Plus, with Guild Happy's rapid development, their guild members' egos will be inflated. If we're lucky, we might not even have to instigate anything. Their own people might cause trouble for themselves. It'd be even better if that happened, Arasima said. Yeah, let's have our planted spies do that, Changing Spring said. The three continued to talk. Their minds began to gradually open up and more schemes poured out. They were, after all, experienced players. The reason they were able to develop into the three great guilds was partly because of their team's strength in the Pro Alliance, but also because of these three players. In terms of the struggles between guilds, they were absolutely the top of the top experts in the field. They could only step down gracefully against Lord Grimm for the dungeon records, so they thought of plans that didn't involve direct confrontations. After a long discussion, they created the plan and the rest was up to the guilds to carry out. The three stayed in contact while giving orders to their guild's players. On Blue Brook Guild's side, Blue River received Changing Spring's orders. His expression immediately darkened. I thought we weren't going to compete with Lord Grimm, Blue River asked gloomily. That was then. This is now. He's created a guild and has become our direct competitor. It's not possible for us to avoid him now. Do you really think him creating a guild is just for fun? Changing Spring said. Blue River didn't say anything. He understood very well. It was just that he had a fairly good relationship with Ye Xiu. He had a good impression of him. Fighting and scheming against someone who was originally his friend didn't make him feel good. The three great guilds are all doing the same. We'll be in touch with other guilds, too, so just relax and do it, Changing Spring said. Blue River closed the message in silences. After pausing for a moment, he let out a long sigh and then began doing what he had been told to do. His first task was to sort out all of the open accounts that weren't in Blue Brook Guild. His second task was to begin gathering intelligence to see how many players had left their guilds due to Guild Happy's creation. These guilds would definitely be unhappy with Lord Grim and Guild Happy, which was exactly what Changing Spring and the others wanted to take advantage of. As for Herb Garden and Tyrannical Ambition, after receiving their orders, they all began working to carry them out as well. At this moment, the system made another announcement. Congratulations, Guild Happy, for reaching level 5. From creating a guild to reaching level 5, their rapid development made the other guilds want to cry. Guild Happy was celebrating. These new glory players didn't really understand much about guilds, but from what their guild leader said, level 5 seemed to be a very important level. At this level, their guild could have some sort of guardian or whatever. A lot of players had already gone to search what this guardian was, and they naturally yearned for it. Seeing that their guild had finally reached level 5, everyone began waiting for the guardian to descend. You can get a guardian now. Seeing the guild's rapid development, Chen Guo had been watching excitedly the entire time and reminded Ye Xiu when she saw that the guild reached level 5. Yup, Ye Xiu nodded his head. The guardian couldn't be obtained just by hitting level 5. A quest had to be completed. The quest was very simple: beat the corresponding guardian. When the guardian was subdued, the guardian would give the guild its Blessing the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com Chapter 350. Chapter 350. High-leveled characters. The Stat Guardian was the most popular guardian amongst players, and it truly did give the best benefit to a player's stats. It was equivalent to obtaining extra stat points, which the player could then freely choose to use. The Stat Guardian gave 8 extra stat points to players for every level it gained. At its maximum level, level 20, it would give an additional 160 points. Its impact on a character's strength couldn't be ignored. Even for normal guilds, the few extra points were enough to create a noticeable difference in strength between two players with the same level and equipment. It was because of this that very few players weren't in a guild. Even for the pro accounts in the Pro Alliance in-game, they had to have the guild's name tagged onto them. There were not any players that did not follow this rule. This was, of course, done for those extra stat points. Guild Happy had reached level 5, and completing the Guardian quest became an urgent priority. Ye Xiu didn't try to take on a new and original path. The Guardian he wanted was naturally the Stat Guardian. After receiving the quest, Ye Xiu immediately began to gather people. Players who wanted to challenge the Guardian for the quest would be sent to a dungeon. Inside the dungeon, there was nothing else there but the Guardian. The dungeon limited the number of players to 20. Ye Xiu, Tang Ru, Su Ma Cheng, and Steamed Bun Invasion would obviously be a part of this team. Kaio Yifen's 1-inch ash was still being leveled by someone else, so they couldn't contact him. Seven Fields and his friends still couldn't join Happy yet, so they couldn't be sent into a guild dungeon. Besides them, there was Concealed Light. However, Concealed Light's skill level in actual battle truly was extraordinarily bad. Even though Ye Xiu had helped him find some ways to practice, he had not been practicing for long, so Ye Xiu had no idea how much he had improved. Ye Xiu didn't know anyone else, so he chose the rest based on their class and level. When forming the base for the 20-player team, the higher the level the player had, the better. Blue River suddenly gave a puzzling look. After seeing the announcement that Happy had reached level 5, he immediately called for the open accounts to move out and apply to enter Happy. He had even personally switched to an open account to request an invite from Happy. The infiltration went smoothly. Not long after requesting an invite, he received a notification from Happy, and almost simultaneously, the other 3 open accounts also received notifications. Their infiltration had been successful as well. Blue River immediately checked what the guild channel was chatting about and discovered that most of them were talking about the Guardian. A level 5 guild talking about Guardians wasn't anything abnormal. However, soon after, he received a team invite from the guild's leader, Lord Grimm, causing him to be surprised. Blue River didn't know what was going on, so he chose to accept. After joining the team, he found that there wasn't a single team, but rather 2 teams in order to form a 20-player group. From this, Blue River instantly realized what Lord Grimm was planning on doing. He then saw that Blue Brook Guild's other 3 open accounts had also joined the team. One of those 3 players was very confused. Seeing that all 4 open accounts were here, he hastily messaged Blue River in surprise. "Have we been caught?" This question caused Blue River to panic, but he quickly calmed down. He told him not to worry and then went to check the 20-player group structure. Lord Grimm, Soft Mist, Cleansing Mist, and Steamed Bun Invasion. These names weren't new to Blue River. Seeing these characters, Blue River felt a large amount of pressure bearing down on him. He knew that if these players were to compete for dungeon records, no one in the 10th server could compete with them. And now, they were gathered together. Although, one good thing was that Steamed Bun Invasion seemed to be very underleveled compared to the other first-string characters, and Blue River was immediately able to figure out that it was the result of him not participating in the Christmas event. Lord Grimm's team also had a Ghostblade character. Blue River remembered that the character's name was 1-Inch Ash, but he wasn't in the team right now. Blue River opened up the guild member list and prepared to do a search. But as soon as he opened it, he noticed the default ordering for the guild member list. The first column was by rank. The second column was by level. In Happy, apart from the guild's leader, Lord Grimm, who didn't have a class, the ordering was done from highest level to lowest level. At the top was Lord Grimm, Soft Mist and Cleansing Mist at level 39. And beneath them were those 4 open accounts from Blue Brook Guild that had infiltrated Happy. Blue River understood why they had been invited into the 20-player group. It was because they were already the highest level characters in Happy. This type of situation was quite good for them. A higher level meant a higher status. Even though they couldn't enter Lord Grimm's inner circle, they were still in a higher position than those low-level players. Blue River did a casual skim over the rest of the names and was stumped for words. The players' levels in Happy were unexpectedly low. The character Blue River was using and the other 3 open accounts were all around level 36, and the number of guild members in this level range was extremely few in this guild of 500 players. The number of guild members above level 35 was 19. Everyone else was below level 35, and near the end, there were even some level 20 players. Blue River was astonished. He had predicted that the average player's level in Happy couldn't compare to their Blue Brook Guild, but he didn't think that there would be such a large disparity. In their Blue Brook Guild, level 35 and above players held the majority, while players below level 35 were the minority. With Lord Grimm's fame in the 10th server and the craze over Happy's founding, he had the qualifications to compare with their top guilds. But in reality, it seemed like a gathering of a bunch of level 30 players. What was the reasoning behind this? Could he be trying to establish the players' loyalty to the guild by raising them up from lower levels? Blue River could only guess. He then opened up Happy's list of invite requests and discovered that it wasn't that Happy didn't want to pick the high-level players. It was that there simply weren't any level 35 and above players that had signed up. Those that were above level 35 had already joined a different guild or were open accounts, similar to the one Blue River was using. Blue River was, after all, an experienced player. After a quick analysis, he was able to quickly understand the situation. This was because of the Christmas event disaster, as well as a type of restriction due to the top guilds. In Blue River's eyes, level 36 players weren't considered high level. Right now, if a player wanted to join Blue Brook Guild, the minimum requirement was to be level 35. The guild members who currently weren't level 35 had joined the guild in the early stages, but hadn't been able to keep up with the fast leveling speed. However, for the rest of the 10th server, level 36 was where players would go to Fire Forest and soon graduate to challenge Sin City. For those who hadn't participated in the Christmas event with Lord Grimm, these players were at the forefront. If Ye Xiu hadn't used such a valiant strategy for the Christmas event, and the top guilds had only leveled the normal way in Sin City, then they would only be at level 36 as well. These players would already be considered the elites of their guild, the top players in the 10th server. Because of the Christmas event, such an abnormal occurrence happened. If not for that, then level 36 would have been the level range where they should be at. After them were the level 36 players, who would have been amongst the highest leveled players if the elites from the top guilds hadn't leveled with Lord Grimm with the Christmas event. After the Christmas event, they leveled up once or twice more. Slightly below those were where the majority of the players from their top guilds were at. To put it simply, there were very few players around level 36 in the entire 10th server. In addition, most of them were in the top guilds. As for those without guilds, those who were at this level range probably didn't want to join a guild, so they obviously wouldn't have thought much about Happy's creation. As a result, in the end, these open accounts from their top guilds, possessing the level of their normal guild members, would immediately stand out in Happy. After understanding all of this, Blue River was suddenly taken aback after seeing the list of level 35 and above players. In the 10th server, there really weren't many players around level 36 that sought after Happy. Could it be that all of these level 35 and above players were the same as him, and were open accounts that had been sent to infiltrate Happy? The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 351, Chapter 351. A haze of doubts and suspicions. The more Blue River thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Thinking of this, Blue River opened up his friends' list and planned to search for other guild leaders. But when he saw that his friends' list was empty, he stared blankly for a moment before realizing that he was using an open account, not his Blue River account. How could he have those guys as friends on this account? Helpless, Blue River contacted Changing Spring, who was still in the 10th server, and gave him his analysis of the situation. Wait. Changing Spring gave a simple reply when the message came through. Not long after, Changing Spring messaged again. This time the message was even simpler. Q. Blue River was startled at first, but luckily he was familiar with Changing Spring's typing style and understood that he wanted him to get on QQ. He tabbed out of the game and opened up QQ. He immediately received a group chat invite. When he joined, he saw that the chat group was very active. There were 10 people in the room, all using their in-game IDs. There was not one that Blue River didn't recognize. A few more people came in after he joined. In the chat room, there was more than one person representing each guild. Similar to their Blue Brook Guild, besides the 10th server's guild leader, the true guild leader had also joined the group chat. Has everyone gotten a feel for the situation? The first to speak was Herb Garden's Arasima. Let's not say the account IDs, just say how many you have inside so we can have a clearer picture of the situation. Tyrannical Ambitions Cold Knight suggested. Seeing these two speak, Blue River could tell that the other guilds were in the same position as him. They also realized that the high-level players in Guild Happy were their players. We have 4 on our side. Cold Knight took the lead. Same. 4. Blue River followed. 3. Herb Garden's Plantago Seed said. 2. Samsara's Lonely Drink was here as well. Team Samsara had high ambitions for the season. Their guild wasn't the strongest in-game, but they were putting in great amounts of effort towards their development. 1. The other two guilds had one infiltrator. After adding the numbers up, there were 15 altogether, and right now, Guild Happy had a total of 19 level 35 and above players. Apart from Lord Grim, Soft Mist, and Cleansing Mist, there was only one high-level player that had nothing to do with them. The chat group's members sent out faces one after the other. If the other side hasn't figured it out yet, then we're in a good spot. Herb Garden's Plantago Seed said, I get what you mean. Blue River said, but how couldn't he have figured this out? All of us requested for an invite after Happy reached level 5. That other high-level player might have joined before this, but this time, with so many of us running over all of a sudden, it'd be strange if he didn't feel something was wrong, no. But look, all of us have been invited into the party. This party is clearly for challenging the Guardian, which means he's not suspicious of us yet. Plantago Seed said, that's not necessarily true. Maybe he just wants to use us to beat the Guardian. Blue River said, then he'll never be able to get the Guardian. Plantago Seed replied. Everyone heard this and immediately understood. Plantago Seed meant that if they wanted to, they could intentionally feign that they were unable to defeat the Guardian. Even though their accounts would have some losses, these open accounts had been prepared to be sacrificed anyways, whether they succeeded or not. I say, even if we don't try for the Guardian, they're more than good enough to beat it on their own. Losing a few times would at most damage their image a bit, which isn't even close to what our goals are, no, Cold Knight said. Everyone began contemplating again after hearing this. Doing things like this wouldn't cause a lot of damage, but if we do things like this, it might even strengthen their trust in us. Herb Garden's guild leader, Arasima, suddenly said, true, Changing Spring approved but didn't give any reasons why. Everyone in the group chat was an experienced player. Even though they didn't hear the reasoning, just by thinking about it, they were able to figure out the reason. The difficulty for the Guardian was fixed. It depended upon the guild's level and had nothing to do with the players' levels. If there were 20 level 70 players, beating the level 1 Guardian wouldn't be difficult in the slightest. But for level 35-39 players, they couldn't be too careless when fighting the level 1 Guardian. When the level cap in Glory was level 50, normal guilds had to gather together 20 level 50 players in order to defeat the Guardian. It was just that as players became more and more experienced, the level requirement decreased. For guilds backed by clubs, 20 level 30 or so players were more than enough to defeat a level 1 Guardian now. But Happy was different. Apart from these moles, who harbored ill intentions, the guild could be considered to be a guild completely comprised of new players. The situation would be the same as when Glory first opened. New players weren't good enough to beat the Guardian, so level 35-39 players beating the Guardian would actually be a difficult task. In order to avert Lord Grim's suspicion and gain Lord Grim's trust, it might be best to act like new players and get stuck on the Guardian a few times, erasing any doubts that they were experts from the top guilds. Not a bad idea. Let's do that, Tyrannical Ambitions Jiangyu said. Soon after, everyone agreed. In-game, the level 35 and above characters were invited into the party. Along with Lord Grim, Soft Mist, Cleansing Mist, and Steamed Bun Invasion, this put the party at exactly 20 players. At this moment, Lord Grim was telling them the strategy to defeat the Guardian and was almost done explaining. They obviously knew the strategy. Even if they needed to, they wouldn't listen. They had to pretend to be new players. Chen Guo's spirits were raised when she saw that the guild finally had a few level 35 and above players. It was already late at night, but she didn't want to sleep yet. Not just her, Almost everyone in Guild Happy was still online. Everyone wanted to see the Guardian fall. As a result, they continued to receive guild quests while paying attention to the announcements. Ye Xiu finished explaining the strategy, but the party channel was completely quiet. He had no idea if they understood what he had said. When Chen Guo saw this reaction, she immediately began feeling uneasy. She had been in other guilds before she had joined Excellent Dynasty and participated in the Guardian quests. She knew very well that the boss's strength couldn't be looked down on. If the party failed the challenge, all of the penalties for dying would be assumed. The cost for taking the challenge would also be wasted. This challenge required money in order to try. In addition, the success or failure of the challenge would be announced in the world chat. Failing the challenge would undoubtedly hurt the guild's morale, as well as damage the guild's image. To the guilds backed by clubs, they felt that these penalties weren't serious enough. But in Chen Guo's eyes, they were more than enough. Even though a god like Ye Xiu was presiding over the challenge, Chen Guo was still worried. "Are you sure about this? Maybe it'd be better to wait until you've reached a higher level," Chen Guo said. "Relax." Ye Xiu replied with a smile. "Look at these slow-witted idiots. They didn't react at all. Did they understand anything you said?" Chen Guo looked at the chat record in the party channel. It was all Ye Xiu's messages. The others were completely silent. Chen Guo suddenly thought of something else. She stretched her neck out and asked Tang Ru, "Little Tang, how much of it did you understand?" But as Chen Guo expected, Tang Ru was completely puzzled and she shook her head. For someone who had never seen a guardian, Ye Xiu's explanation for beating it was too much for her to digest. "See, this isn't good." Chen Guo was worried. "These guys are all new players. They don't understand anything you're saying and they're not asking either. New players who pretend they understand when they actually don't are the scariest type. How are you guys going to beat it?" "Don't worry about little Tang. Her mechanics are enough to get her through. She can learn while fighting it. There won't be a problem." Ye Xiu laughed. "I wasn't talking about her, I'm talking about those guys." Chen Guo pointed to the names on Ye Xiu's party list. "Oh, these guys, they're even less of a problem." Ye Xiu didn't turn his head, but the corner of his lips were clearly raised. When Chen Guo tried to look closer, the weird smile on his face had already disappeared. All that was left was his usual calm appearance. "What's going on?" Chen Guo felt that there was something she was missing. "I can't be certain that there aren't any new players in the bunch, but it's very unlikely that all of them are new players." Ye Xiu grinned. "How can you be so certain?" Chen Guo asked. "Because of their levels," Ye Xiu said. "Is it really only because of their levels?" Chen Guo said. Ye Xiu nodded his head. "That's not a good reason," Chen Guo said. "There's an abnormality in level differences in the 10th server," Ye Xiu said. He then shifted the subject. "You probably didn't know that every guild backed by clubs have a batch of open accounts, right?" "Open accounts?" "Accounts that haven't joined a guild," Ye Xiu said. "What are those for?" Chen Guo clearly didn't know. "To do bad things, for example, to become undercover moles," Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo was startled. She had heard many stories about undercover moles. "So you're saying that these characters are all moles from these top guilds?" Chen Guo said. "There were never very many level 35 and above characters. Even rarer are those without a guild already. With so many coming out all of a sudden, besides these open accounts owned by these top guilds, there aren't very many other possibilities." Ye Xiu said the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 352, Chapter 352, each with their own motives. "Then if you clearly knew that these high-leveled players were spies, why did you let them join?" Chen Guo asked. "They'll help me beat the Guardian. Higher-leveled players are always better than lower-leveled players," Ye Xiu said. "But what if these guys don't try on purpose?" Chen Guo couldn't relax. "Ha, even if they don't try, they wouldn't play too badly. If it's too obvious that they are trying to lose, wouldn't they be exposed? Don't forget their identities, they're spies. Getting exposed right after getting in just for our Guardian, that's definitely not worth it. Spies can only be used once you know. Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo didn't know what to say. She could only look at those high-leveled characters with sympathy. They probably thought that their infiltration had been successful. Seeing that Chen Guo wasn't going to ask any more questions, Ye Xiu turned his head and asked his team another question. So that's pretty much it. Is there anything you didn't understand? It doesn't really matter. We'll just do what you tell us to do. Steamed Bun Invasion's reply was as simple as ever. Got it. Got it. The others also replied. They were trying really hard to act the part of new players. Good. After seeing everyone's response, he clicked. The originally 2 teams of 10 players each were split into 7. 6 teams had 3 players, while 1 team had 2 players, Ye Xiu and Suma Cheng. We're going in, Ye Xiu said, and then the 20-player group was quickly sent into the Guardian's instance dungeon. This dungeon only had 1 boss. As soon as they entered, they saw the outline of the sleeping Guardian through the thick fog. Teams 1, 2, and 3 go left. Teams 4, 5, and 6 go right. Ye Xiu ordered. Each team had an obvious number labeled onto them. Thus, 3 teams went left while the other 3 teams went right. Stop, Ye Xiu called. The 6 teams had no choice but to stop. These orders were too simple. Even if Blue River and the others were pretending to be noobs, they couldn't make such a mistake. If they made such a mistake, they wouldn't be noobs, they'd be idiots. Each side make a line, melee classes in front, ranged classes in the back. Maintain a 24-unit distance between each other. Do you guys know how to calculate these units? Hover your mouse over the other players and look at the coordinates shown. Then check your coordinates and calculate. Ye Xiu patiently explained. The spies didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed like Lord Grimm really was treating them like noobs and teaching them every little detail. If they were noobs, this should have been something to be happy about. Except to these players, listening to this sort of extremely basic knowledge only made them want to cry. Yes, yes, just like that. Bamboo Street, move back a tiny bit. The guy on the right, move 1 step to the left. Ye Xiu began instructing them as if he were a kindergarten teacher teaching small children. The spies were tossing and turning from side to side. They had to continue pretending to not know anything. They couldn't reveal that they weren't noobs. How much time should they take to get into position? If they got into position too quickly, it'd be bad if they appeared too experienced, but if they got into position too slowly, wouldn't they look like idiots? They were in a knot. Some intentionally acted stupid, but their mistakes were quickly caught by Ye Xiu. After a few minutes, everyone was finally in the correct position. Good, no one move. Wait for my orders, Ye Xiu said. They were all silent. They were already impatiently thinking of how to get themselves killed by the Guardian and hurry up and get out of this dungeon. Pull it. Ye Xiu sent Suma Cheng's cleansing mist a message. Yes, sir. Suma Cheng's cleansing mist lifted her cannon and fired anti-tank missiles. The 3 anti-tank missiles shot forward. The spies on both sides were jumping with joy on the inside. The battle had finally begun. Quite a few were already planning on moving forward. Jump back 3 steps. But how could they have expected that Lord Grimm would give an order all of a sudden? This order was also extremely simple. If they made a mistake, there would be no excuses they could make. Thus, the spies had no choice but to follow the order and jump back 3 steps. Players who had fought against the Stat Guardian before were very unhappy right now. This was because they knew what these 3 steps back indicated. Bang, bang, bang. 3 cannon shots. The explosions from the anti-tank missiles seemed very minuscule compared to the enormous silhouette of the Guardian. An angry roar burst out and the silhouette stood up. Just by looking at the Guardian's bodily proportions, it was very easy to see that the Guardian and the players weren't in the same weight class. Ow! Another angry roar. As if its body was weightless, the Guardian suddenly jumped out from the fog and landed in the space between the 2 teams. Everyone's screens shook. This was Glory's visual effect during an earthquake. The dust and earth that was lifted up surged throughout the surroundings like waves. However, Ye Xiu had already ordered everyone to jump back, allowing them to dodge the shockwave. Those who were familiar with the Guardian had wanted to act like they didn't know what was coming. That way, they'd get swept away by the shockwave and then have the Guardian step on them with its feet to kill them. But Lord Grimm had accurately predicted the distance of the shockwave. His super simple orders made it so there was no room for them to make mistakes. "Wait for my commands before you attack," Ye Xiu repeated. The spies couldn't disobey and had no choice but to sit on the sidelines like obedient children. Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm swung his 1,000-chance umbrella in front of him and began shooting. These tiny shots made it seem like they were completely ineffective against the Guardian. However, these were just visual effects. The damage that should have been dealt was dealt. Lord Grimm jumped back, continually firing. Cleansing Mist also stayed beside him and continued to fire at the Guardian. Watching, the spies were having trouble understanding what was going on. If Lord Grimm was supposed to establish the aggro, then why was the launcher still attacking? What type of strategy was this? As they continued to be puzzled, the Guardian rushed forward. With its gigantic body, each step traversed several units. In just a few steps, the Guardian arrived in front of two players. It lifted its foot and stepped down towards them. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 353, Chapter 353. Even if you want to die, you can't. The spies on the two sides were in complete silence, hoping very much that Lord Grimm and Cleansing Mist had been killed by the stomp. But Lord Grimm's fame in the 10th server wasn't baseless. If he had gotten killed so easily, then the guilds that had been crushed by him would feel even more humiliated. Those who knew of Lord Grimm's identity, like Blue River, were already quite certain that the launcher, Cleansing Mist, was Sima Cheng. The synergy between the two of them were considered at the peak, even in the Pro-Alliance. So while others were puzzled over their strange strategy, Blue River felt sad. He knew that they were able to use strategies that many normal players were unable to do, or even hope to understand, because the gap between their skill levels was simply too large. Sure enough, everyone's worries, hopes, and doubts were for nothing. Amidst the earth waves caused by the Guardian's stomp, the two characters were high up in the air. Their guns were pointed towards the ground with an aerial fire, allowing them to dodge the Guardian's stomp, as well as the shockwaves brought by it. The two characters landed behind the Guardian. Even though the Guardian wasn't slow, its enormous body still made it slightly sluggish. Lord Grimm and Cleansing Mist's attacks in this short moment made all of the surrounding spies wide-eyed with awe. Quite a few of them gasped in admiration, although Blue River and the others, who knew his identity, were somewhat calmer. The Guardian finished turning around. This time, he didn't lift his foot to stomp down. He swung his arms and whirled a strong wind. But Ye Xiu and Sima Cheng had been prepared. They easily avoided it and then circled around behind the Guardian again to continue attacking. It went on like this for a while, making everyone who was watching dumbstruck and in awe. The Guardian's sluggishness was only relative. In reality, its movements were quite agile. But these two, with their quick fingers, turned what wasn't supposed to be a weakness into a weakness. The spies were in an uproar. Even though they didn't know who was who, they still knew the ones from their own guild, so they began to discuss amongst each other. DMN, Lord Grimm's way better than I thought. Who is that launcher? She seems even better than Lord Grimm. Are these guys even from the same world as us? Even though it was somewhat exaggerated, it was quite close to the truth. In a short moment, the spies all forgot why they were here and were only gasping in admiration at their brilliant play style. After a while, they recalled their goal, but with where they were at right now, even if they wanted to die, they couldn't. However, everyone noticed that despite Lord Grimm's and Cleansing Mist's amazing playing, beating the Guardian by themselves wasn't possible. Even if they didn't make any mistakes, they would eventually run out of mana. And without mana to use skills, they had no way of revolving around the Guardian like they were doing now. The Guardian was set up for 20 players to kill. Just from this, it was easy to see that it was much stronger than a boss from a 5-player dungeon. No matter how exceptional they were at lasting a long time, it wasn't possible to completely finish the dungeon with just 2 players. Furthermore, these 2's attack tempos were very quick. Their mana consumption was certainly more than ordinary, so it would be even more difficult to endure for so long. This battle required everyone's strength. Thinking of this, the spies calmed down. These 2 really were incredible, but even so, their goals could still be reached. No matter what happened, as long as they joined the battle, then finding an opportunity to kill themselves should be easy. No. They were all pretty much thinking like this. At this moment, Lord Grim and Cleansing Mist finally changed up their actions. The 2 characters used aerial fire and landed in front of the line of spies on the left side. The Guardian chased after them. None of the spies panicked. On the contrary, they were quite hopeful. Feeling good about dying was a very rare experience. They were all squirming with longing. As soon as the Guardian's attack descended, it wouldn't be good if they took the initiative to kill themselves, but they could at least pretend that their reaction speeds were too slow to survive. Closer, closer. The Guardian had already reached in front of them. Just as it was about to attack the line of players, it suddenly turned around. "Attack!" Lord Grim suddenly shouted. The spies stared blankly as the Guardian's back turned to face towards them. With such a large opening exposed, they had no choice but to attack. But the Guardian completely ignored them. It continued to stride forward. The spies naturally chased after it to attack. They hoped the Guardian would turn its head to look at them, but they knew that it wouldn't. This was because they could already see that Lord Grim and Cleansing Mist had already begun working separately. Lord Grim stood on one side, while Cleansing Mist stood on the other. Right now, the Guardian was heading towards Cleansing Mist. Only now did the spies realize that they hadn't known where the Guardian's aggro was the entire time. In the beginning, Cleansing Mist had pulled the monster, but then Lord Grim had snatched it away. Afterwards, the 2 both jumped at the same time. When the Guardian tried to catch them, the only thing the spies could remember was that it was chasing them around. Who exactly was it going for? Impossible to tell. They couldn't see it. But now that they separated, it was very clear that the Guardian's aggro was locked onto Cleansing Mist. Right now, the aggro wasn't in their direction. They could only chase and unleash their attacks at the Guardian's back. But no matter what they did, the Guardian refused to turn around. Soon enough, they all became the team's DPS, and the reflection from the spies' screens showed their depressed expressions. Some tried to take the initiative and attempted to create an opportunity for themselves. But who would have thought that as soon as they moved forward, Lord Grim would appear in front to block them? He then gave an order: "Do not go past me." It was a very simple order. If they couldn't even follow this, calling themselves a new player wouldn't be a good enough explanation. The only explanation would be that they were idiots. It would also make it obvious that they were intentionally trying to mess things up. Helpless, they could only obediently follow Lord Grim's directions and attack. "Stop!" Lord Grim shouted again. Another simple command that they couldn't disobey. Even though some of them pretended that they hadn't heard it and continued to attack, Lord Grim called them out by name and even messaged them personally. There was no way that they could keep pretending, and these few extra hits weren't enough to create enough of a disturbance. "Retreat back to your original positions," Lord Grim said. They could only retreat. Some wanted to pretend that they didn't remember where they were originally and stand in the wrong spot, but they soon discovered that they weren't able to fake it. This was because their troops weren't completely pure. Soft Mist, the battle mage from Lord Grim's friend group, accurately stood at her original position. And then, those who stood in the wrong spot were immediately corrected by Lord Grim with Soft Mist as the reference. The spies were very sad. This was because they saw that not long after they retreated, the Guardian unleashed a powerful skill, which would have hit them. Unfortunately, the opportunity to kill themselves passed by just like that. The spies on the left line looked towards the other side. They watched as the Guardian ferociously charged towards that side and watched as the spies on the right side began to think the same as them previously. Suddenly, their hearts thumped as they realized something. Bang! Just when the spies were trying to figure out what to do next, gunfire exploded onto the Guardian's body. Lord Grim hadn't retreated like the spies on the left line. Instead, he had continued to attack, and after the barrage, the Guardian turned around. And sure enough, the spies cried out in their hearts. And then, the spies on the right line did what they had done previously. They furiously chased after and attacked the Guardian's back with cleansing mist as the person they couldn't go past. Everything was just that simple. It could be your first time playing Glory, but you had still played for around 30 levels. As long as you were a human being, there was no reason you couldn't do such a simple task. The spies were in complete dismay. They discovered that they really had become free laborers. With the situation they were in, there was no way they could die, unless Lord Grim and Cleansing Mist made mistakes. However, they had already witnessed their skill. And after separating, their aggro control appeared to be even more precise. The two could actually make the Guardian run back and forth between the two teams. If the battle continued like this, the clerics might not even need to use a heal. They were all frightened now. Even though on the surface it seemed like nothing had changed, but in the chat they were already in complete disorder. Right now, even if they wanted to die, they couldn't. To possess such terrifying control, just who were these two? The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 354, Chapter 354. Firm decision, however, without any definitive proof. Thinking that a normal player in the game was a top-tier pro player exceeded their imagination, especially for the more experienced players of Glory. Every single one of these spies were experienced veterans, though, so in the end, they didn't dare think to assume two players' true identities. Everyone still carried one last line of hope. After all, this sort of precise control was very demanding for the player. A single error could cause the whole situation to go amiss, and losing control over a monster's aggro was the main reason for a team wipe. So if something like that really did happen, then pretending to be noobs and dying would be a lot easier. Only Blue River and the others, who knew of these two's true identities, felt truly hopeless. Who were these two? These were the two players that had consecutively won Best Duo in the pro scene. With that type of synergy between them, they wouldn't deserve that title if they slipped up while dealing with an NPC. Blue River still received messages from other spies, though, who were still patiently analyzing the situation. Lord Grim's true identity was knowledge that only relatively high-ranking members of Blue Brook Guild knew. When they faced him, they often had feelings of cowardice and fear. These feelings had already overwhelmed Blue River. However, he couldn't share his knowledge with them and could only watch as they patiently waited for an opportunity. He strengthened his resolve and decided that he too would hope that a miracle would occur. Correct. In Blue River's eyes, hoping that this duo would make a mistake was the same as hoping for a miracle. Attack, retreat, attack, retreat. Those were pretty much the only words that came out of Lord Grim's mouth. Their attacks were led by him and Cleansing Mist. Their retreats were led by Soft Mist and Steamed Bun Invasion. The two didn't make any mistakes. He goes, then she goes. Everyone had already gotten used to the routine. Making a mistake now would be extremely embarrassing. Miracle. A miracle is a highly improbable event. Blue River was hoping for a miracle, but the majority of the spies held a normal attitude. In their eyes, it would be a miracle if the two didn't make a mistake. And the result? The Guardian's health continued to drop. Those who were hoping for a miracle didn't receive one. Those who were afraid of a miracle watched as the miracle began to unfold. The spies no longer had the time to continue waiting for the two to make mistakes and began to employ more active approaches. They would go all out in order to force the Guardian's aggro to go out of control. The spies who tried to do this were initially afraid of arousing Lord Grimm's suspicions because of their unrestrained attacks, but in the end, none of them were called out for it. As a result, all of the spies began to think along the same line. Don't worry about aggro, just put out as much damage as possible. However, Lord Grimm's and Cleansing Mist's aggro control wasn't disrupted. The two continued to pull the Guardian back and forth. The spies discovered that their unrestrained damage dealing only increased the speed at which the Guardian was dying. Not one spy there wanted that to happen. Seeing that their method wasn't working, they immediately abandoned it. Attacking resolutely wasn't good. Attacking too slowly would arouse Lord Grimm's suspicions. The bunch of spies were having great difficulty figuring out what to do. With none of their schemes working, they attempted to do something again. Finally, after seeing that the battle was coming to a close, and Lord Grimm and Cleansing Mist didn't look to be making any mistakes anytime soon, the spies from the top guilds were now discussing in private and reporting their situation to their higher-ups. Blue River also noticed that their QQ group chat had gone into a huge commotion. With the battle shifting from one side to the other, he had the time to look over at the chat occasionally. He hastily skimmed over it but didn't see anything substantial. Though in-game, he received a message, and the group chat quickly came to a conclusion. The notification explained that there were already so many spies. Sacrificing one or two wouldn't be a problem, but they had to break Guild Happy's momentum and have the 10th server see that Lord Grimm's guild could also encounter problems. As for the plan itself, they had to pick which spies to sacrifice in order to intentionally mess up the situation and create a chance for a team to wipe. In the end, because Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition had 4 spies inside the guild, the 2 guilds would sacrifice 1 spy each. After receiving the message, Blue River told the other 3 spies, but who would have thought that the 3 would fight over who would be sacrificed? As the guild leader, Blue River naturally had his own pride, so he didn't join his subordinates in fighting for the spot. Plus, he knew that he was only temporarily using this account. 2 people were not allowed to use the same account at once. He still had to take care of his main account. What guild leader would personally become a spy? In the end, Blue Brook Guild rolled a die to see who would be the sacrifice. Tyrannical Ambition pretty much did the same to choose their sacrifice as well. They then communicated with their higher-ups. The order came down to immediately begin. There wasn't much time left. Under the gazes of envy from the other spies, the 2 sacrifices began to wreak havoc. Even though being a spy in-game wasn't as thrilling as in real life, apart from a few abnormal people, most people didn't like doing this type of thing. Being a spy meant becoming friends with someone and then selling them out. Whether it was for justice or not, doing it always felt bad. The 2 sacrifices just happened to be on the same side, and since the 2 sides took turns attacking, this allowed them to work together to attempt to disrupt the flow. It just happened that their team was chasing after the Guardian and attacking right now. The 2 confirmed the command, and they no longer hesitated. Anything Ye Xiu told them not to do, they would immediately do. The first thing they had to do was pass the line that Ye Xiu told them not to pass. Amidst the spies' hopeful gazes, they suddenly heard 2 system notifications. 2 guild notifications popped up in their guild chat. Player More Seasoning has been kicked out from the guild by guild leader Lord Grimm. Player Clearly Smooth has been kicked out from the guild by guild leader Lord Grimm. The spies' attacks clearly turned sluggish all of a sudden. They almost completely stopped attacking. The decision had been too decisive. More seasoning and clear smooth had only passed Lord Grim by 1 unit, but Lord Grim didn't even attempt to ask what was going on and directly kicked them out of the guild. The Guardian challenge could only be done by guild members. With them being kicked out from the guild, the two were immediately kicked from the dungeon. They might not have died, but they had been sacrificed for nothing. The spies calmed themselves down with great difficulty, and then immediately reported the situation to the higher-ups. Blue River heard the QQ group chat go into a frenzy again. The discussion seemed to be even crazier than before. "There's no time left," Blue River quietly said. The Guardian was almost dead. Blue River could see it very clearly. How could the others not know? The Guardian would be dead in a short moment, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "Should we stop?" Another private message came. Some of the spies' attacks had already gone sluggish, enough to make others suspicious. "Don't," Blue River decided and immediately told them not to. "There's no point," Blue River said. "It's not that they didn't know kicking players who were causing trouble would destroy their plan. They just didn't think that Lord Grim would be so decisive. They thought it was quite unexpected. Lord Grim always communicated with them when they made mistakes, so the two spies took advantage of this fact to use the best way to cause a ruckus. Who would have thought that as soon as they broke his rules, they'd be kicked? It was something no one expected. Even if they chose more sacrifices, they would be decisively kicked out in the same way. Since the Guardian had so little health left, they weren't necessary to beat it. After all, Guild Happy still had 4 actual members. Slowly whittling down the Guardian's last bit of health wouldn't be a problem. Blue River completely gave up for an even deeper reason. He felt that if Lord Grim could be so decisive, then he might have figured out that they didn't have good intentions long ago. So many high-leveled players joining at once was already very suspicious. This was why everyone wanted to act like new players and get wiped out in order to erase any doubts. But who could have thought that the two's coordination would be so good, from their positioning down to the very details? With all of the orders so simple, intentionally breaking them was difficult to do. Even for more seasoning and clear smooth, who had been kicked out in the very first moment, if they had been allowed to rush forward, how much harm could their betrayal do? No one had any confidence in their answer. It was good now, though. They didn't need to worry about anything anymore. The Guardian's health was so low and it would soon kneel to the ground. The goal for the Guardian challenge wasn't to kill it, but rather to make it kneel. From this acknowledgement, Guild Happy would receive the Guardian's blessing. When the guild reached level 10, the Guardian would be stronger and it would not submit to the guild. At that time, they would have to try the challenge again and defeat the level 2 Guardian. Amidst the Guardian's wild laughter, the world and Guild Happy received an announcement, congratulating on the guild's success in beating the Guardian, and were awarded the Stat Guardian's blessing. The guild celebrated. After understanding the strength of the Guardian's blessing, the players had already studied what to do with their new points. Some carefully looked at their extra points but didn't want to use them yet. They would put it to one side for now in case. Some were in high spirits and immediately allocated their extra points. Blue River and the others. They could only feel depressed, but they had to pretend they were happy. Plus, they had participated in the Guardian Challenge, so they should be even happier. After being unhappy for only a day, these spies already needed to display an attitude that was completely different from how they were feeling. Luckily, this was in-game. If it had been face-to-face, they would have already been exposed. "Guild leader, why did 2 of our players suddenly get kicked out? It seemed like they were part of your team." Someone suddenly asked the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 355, "Who's leaving? Who's staying?" As soon as someone said this, a lot of people began to wonder as well. Although, for the spies, they all froze as if they had been struck by thunder. Who would have thought that Lord Grim would be so quick and decisive? Could he have seen through them from the start? If that were the case, then the others who had come in together with them, were in the same position that they were in. The only difference was that those two had acted out of line and exposed themselves. As for the others, even though they didn't put on a very good performance, they at least did as they had been told. Had they been detected by Lord Grimm or not? This was what made everyone feel uneasy. The spies once again began chatting. They had planned on killing themselves from the very beginning. Failing the Guardian challenge was only their secondary objective. Their main objective was to pretend that they were new, inexperienced players in order to avert any suspicions towards them. But these guys had messed this up. Under Ye Xiu's and Sima Cheng's lead, where it wasn't possible to make any mistake, they all still actively looked to make mistakes. That was the complete opposite of their main objective. The past was the past. They no longer thought about it, but then suddenly, someone raised the question, making everyone once again recall their identities and think of Lord Grimm's decisiveness at that time. It was as if cold water had been splashed on their heads, and they immediately woke up. Messages continued to be typed in the chat, and the question had been lost amidst the storm. However, it would never be erased from the spies' minds. The spies all stared intently at their screens and at the chat to see if Lord Grimm would reply. They all hoped that Lord Grimm wouldn't see the question. Lord Grimm didn't speak in the guild chat, but rather in their party chat. "Good work, everyone." Lord Grimm's name suddenly appeared. "It was nothing. How could that have been difficult?" The spies lied. Even though from a killing the Guardian perspective, it was nothing was the truth, but from the spies' perspective the battle had been very difficult for them. "Then what now?" Lord Grimm said. "What now?" They didn't understand. "Stay or leave. It's up to you guys." Lord Grimm even added a smiley face. The spies stared stupidly at their screens. They understood now. They hadn't dispelled any of Lord Grimm's doubts. They had been compromised from the very beginning. Yet even so, Lord Grimm had still bravely brought them to fight the Guardian. Lord Grimm had been confident because he had the skills to create a situation where it wasn't possible for them to make a mistake. The party chat instantly quieted down. Lord Grimm didn't dissolve the party either. For a short moment, no one said anything. This time, even the private messages to the spies had quieted down and instead went directly to their higher-ups. The QQ group chat set up by the top guilds immediately went into a frenzy again. Blue River was already distraught with anxiety and didn't want to be involved any longer. This Lord Grimm, how cunning! Samsara's 10th server guild leader Lonely Drink hatefully spouted. This was the impression that Ye Xiu had left him since the very first time they had met, and it would never die. He completely ignored the fact that their plans had been too obvious and went straight for the "it's not our fault. Our opponent's just too cunning" analysis. These characters are useless now. There's no point in keeping them if Lord Grimm already knows. Herb Garden's head guild leader Arasima said, "But there's one thing that everyone should know." Tyrannical ambitions Jiang Yu said, "Speak." Blue Brook Guild's Changing Spring typed in his usual manner, telling everyone that he was still there. "Even though the majority of the players in the party are ours, there's still one person who's not with us. He's an actual high-leveled player who wanted to join Happy." Jiang Yu said, "True." Cold Knight naturally helped his boss and immediately provided proof for it from the chat logs. The proof listed the number of spies from each guild. In that 20-player team, there was actually one person who wasn't theirs. "What I want to know right now is whether or not some guild is hiding him from us," Jiang Yu asked. "Definitely not," Lonely Drink said. The other guild representatives confirmed that they weren't hiding anything either. "If that's true, then I believe we can have the majority of our characters leave the guild, but have a small portion of them stay and establish a good relationship with this player. That way, if this guy really isn't a spy, then he can be a good cover for us. If necessary, he can help vouch for us," Jiang Yu said. "Might that be a little bit excessive?" Arasima said, "This time, our biggest issue was that we didn't consider everything. Our characters' levels were clearly very high for characters of the 10th server. Lord Grimm would have certainly anticipated that we would send spies into his guild. And with so many high-leveled players coming in at once, how could he not be suspicious? Now that everyone's been exposed, what's the point in trying to continue struggling to stay in? I think it'd be better to just have everyone leave and then later on have more suitable characters infiltrate. Oh really? Then how about you guys have everyone leave first? Jiang Yu said. Arasima was about to make the decision when his mind suddenly spun. Ha ha, if we're going to leave, then everyone has to leave together. Aren't we all in this together? Everyone immediately understood the hidden details. Honestly speaking, Jiang Yu's plan to win over a cover for them wasn't necessary, but could he have intentionally put out the plan in order to get others to object? For example, Herb Garden. After hearing Jiang Yu speak, he nearly had his characters leave. Even though the spies had failed, no one knew which accounts were from which guild. 3 open accounts weren't much to these top guilds. If they really needed to, they could sell them off. However, in the battle between guilds, no one would miss an opportunity to win an advantage. If they hadn't noticed this detail, then later on, if they used their exposed open account again, it wouldn't matter too much if others had found out. Even worse would be if they pretended to not find out and then set a trap. When everyone thought about this, they immediately went silent. After a moment of silence, the most quiet speaker there, Changing Spring, unexpectedly spoke. Who's leaving? Who's staying? The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 356 Chapter 356. Thanks for the help. It hadn't been easy for Changing Spring to get a word in, but as soon as he did, the group chat fell silent. The group chat was silent, and on Guild Happy's side, the spies were feeling exceptionally awkward. Ye Xiu's words had already been thrown out, and they didn't have any ideas on how to handle them. They looked towards their leaders, but their leaders hadn't come to a decision yet either. For now, the party hadn't been dissolved yet. Lord Grimm, Cleansing Mist, and even Soft Mist and Steamed Bun Invasion were still inside. Even though the spies didn't know what these people were doing, the spies felt like they had been exposed. When a spy personally reveals himself and says, "I'm a spy," that would often be his moment of glory after a successful mission. But when others pointed at him and say, "You're a spy," that would be, without a doubt, one of the most awkward spots a spy could be in. Everyone clearly understood what Lord Grimm's words meant. They had been completely found out. But even so, Lord Grimm didn't force them to leave, which meant that he had absolutely no fear of their existence within the guild. Exposed spies were of practically no value anymore. The reasoning behind it was very simple, which was why the spies were quite puzzled about why their seniors were having trouble coming to a decision. How would they know that their leaders were all trying to cheat each other in the group chat? Blue River was an exception to this. As Blue Brook Guild's 10th server guild leader, he was part of the group chat. Now that he was experiencing miserable feelings from both sides, he suddenly felt very tired. He had been in the guild for a long time and had seen these types of competitions between guilds. Even when making alliances, they still had to be vigilant and approach matters cautiously. As one of the core members of the guild, he also took the same style in handling matters. It was just that, after he arrived in the 10th server, the top guilds had been completely suppressed by Lord Grimm the entire time. But even when matters got to this step, the top guilds still didn't forget to fight amongst each other. It was only for a small matter like 2 or 3 open accounts, but they still felt compelled to scheme against each other. All of this made Blue River feel powerless. "I'm staying," Blue River suddenly typed in the group chat. Everyone was startled. What was that supposed to mean? Everyone was somewhat puzzled. Did that mean that Blue River was personally over there as a spy? Even Blue River himself was somewhat puzzled. Even he himself wasn't sure what he meant by saying, "I'm staying." A chat notification appeared on his QQ window. Blue River opened it and saw that it was from his guild leader, Changing Spring. The message was as simple as ever. It was a single big question mark. "I'm tired." Blue River also replied back simply. The other side didn't reply back. The group chat continued to remain silent, and the spies in Happy continued to feel awkward. This situation continued for a while when Blue River suddenly saw a system notification. Someone had already left Guild Happy. That someone was naturally from their group of spies. 1, 2, 3 players from their party continued to leave. Blue River didn't move. He then received another message from Changing Spring. "What do you mean by I'm staying?" It was surprising that Changing Spring's message contained so many words. If this was a normal situation, Blue River would have definitely gone to find a friend in the guild and laugh. But at this moment, he just wasn't in the right mood. After a short pause, he replied, "I'll wait and see. I'll wait and see." Blue River had no way of saying how he was feeling right now, but these 4 words seemed to have come straight from his heart. This was what he wanted to do, to not even bother thinking about what to do and simply let nature take its course. Blue River waited for a bit again, but he didn't receive a reply from Changing Spring. As for their party and game, in the end, everyone had left, including the 2 open accounts that had gone on with Blue River. The 2 were supposed to take orders from Blue River, but from out of nowhere, they received orders from somewhere else, and after saying bye to Blue River, they also left. Members leaving one after the other had caused quite a shock to Guild Happy. After they found out that the players who had left were all high-level players that had joined to kill the Guardian, they were all very puzzled and were asking around in the guild chat. "It's nothing," Ye Xiu added a smiley face. "They were friends that had joined temporarily to help us beat the Guardian." Ye Xiu explained to the guild members. "Oh," everyone suddenly understood. "Guild leader, you're so amazing. You know so many high-level players." Some of the guild members were already taking this opportunity to flatter their guild leader. Without a doubt in their eyes, level 36 players were at a high level, and to have so many high-level friends was certainly something praiseworthy. "Ha, that's nothing. Our guild leader's level is even higher than theirs." Someone disdained and switched to a different angle to flatter Ye Xiu. The guild chat returned to its harmonious state. The high-level characters had left the guild and no disturbances appeared. Only one person was very confused. "What? I'm not." Only 6 players remained of the original 20 in the party. Apart from Ye Xiu's group of friends, there was Blue River and that very confused brother. Blue River understood him well. This was because he knew that he wasn't a spy from their guild. He obviously wouldn't have understood what Lord Grimm meant previously, and had no idea that Lord Grimm had glossed over the fact that they were all spies. Should he do the same and pretend he was confused? The thought crossed Blue River's mind. He then discovered that this was what tyrannical ambitions Jiang Yu had proposed. It was just that the others had considered it as unnecessary. Did he unknowingly walk along this path? Blue River wanted to let nature take its course. But when things came to head, he found out that he still had to use his brain. Just like now. It'd be weird if he didn't say something. Those who didn't know what was going on should be puzzled like that other brother. He should do the same. Although Blue River really felt too lazy to pretend any longer. Whatever. In the end, Blue River really was too lazy, and so he didn't say anything. He took his account, added the extra points from the level 1 Guardian, and then left the party to level. Right now, he didn't know what he wanted to do. It was just that he didn't have any interest right now in being a spy and making a name for himself with this open account in Guild Happy. He knew that, right now, he didn't want to touch his Blue River account, the one that represented their Blue Brook Guild. Oh, there's still 2 people left. Were these 2 sent by the guilds? Chen Yu saw that after beating the Guardian, almost all of the high-level characters left. Only these 2 remained. "How would I know? I'm not God," Ye Xiu said. This one seems like he isn't fake, but where'd he run off to? What is he planning on doing? Chen Guo commented on the two characters. Ye Xiu shook his head. You're really shameless, though. You actually use spies from other guilds to help you in beating the Guardian. Chen Guo said. It's fine, Ye Xiu said, while using his mouse to click on a few names on his friends' list. Who are these guys? Chen Guo asked. Herb Garden, Tyrannical Ambition, Blue Brook Guild, etc. Their 10th Servers Guild leaders. Ye Xiu introduced them to Chen Guo. Chen Guo knew these guilds well in the heavenly domain, but she didn't know anything about them in the 10th server. Though with your strategy, you'd still be fine even if they weren't there. Chen Guo said. No way. Did you see my character after beating the Guardian? Ye Xiu said. I was almost out of mana, Ye Xiu said. Ah. Chen Guo seemed to have figured something out. Without these high-level characters, this strategy wouldn't have worked. My mana wouldn't be enough to whittle down the Guardian's health the entire way. Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo understood now. To others, it just looked like the other party members just needed to put out damage. But if their damage output wasn't high enough and the battle dragged on for too long, the two characters who controlled the aggro would have run out of mana and been unable to continue. And if you didn't have these guys, how would you have done it? Chen Guo asked. Then we'd have had to wait until we got to a higher level. So you're saying that thanks to these spies you were able to beat the level 1 Guardian? Basically, Ye Xiu nodded his head. Even though it feels very shameless, it feels quite amazing. Were any of them from excellent dynasty? Chen Guo said. Maybe you can go across the street to ask, Ye Xiu said. I really want to. Chen Guo nodded her head honestly. Ha ha ha, forget about it. A casual thanks is good enough, Ye Xiu said. He clicked on a few names from his friends' list and sent them his sincere thanks. Chen Guo could already imagine how these guild leaders would feel when they received the message. FCK your sister, and just like Chen Guo expected, Cold Night, Plantago Seed, Lonely Drink, and the other guild leaders went insane after receiving these messages. The spies they had sent out had become laborers for their enemy. In addition, Lord Grimm's words didn't mention any spies. He actually regarded them as helpers that the top guilds had kindly sent to help him. People who didn't understand the situation wouldn't find any problems with Lord Grimm's thanks. Only the top guilds and their crafty players would feel even more furious over his thanks. Lord Grimm. That night, players from all over the place furiously cursed his Name the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 357. Chapter 357. A lone log can't prop up a tottering building. The event with the Guardian and spies had come to an end. On the surface, Ye Xiu didn't seem to care too much about the remaining two players in the guild, but in his heart, he still paid a lot of attention to them. A single outstanding spy was enough to destroy a guild. Before a guild was backed by a club, they would be extremely weak. Sometimes, what would seem like a very trivial matter could cause a guild to collapse, let alone when someone had infiltrated specifically in order to destroy them. Even though Ye Xiu didn't say anything to the two characters that hadn't left, he took note of their names. This was because he still lacked a way to completely reveal all the spies in his midst. Ye Xiu also had no idea whether or not there were any spies amongst the low-leveled players. Though when he had made the guild, Ye Xiu had made preparations for this, especially since his goal was to eventually form separate teams within the guild. This sort of struggle would never end. If they needed to, they might need to use these types of methods too. There wasn't any right or wrong, just or unjust in this. This was basic strategy in a fight between guilds. For now, Ye Xiu decided not to think about these matters and looked over the guild chat. The majority of players had gone offline to rest after seeing that the Guardian challenge had been successful. The ones who were still online were pretty much the all-nighters. There was no way they could be like the top guilds and have their accounts played on by multiple players as a type of work. These all-nighters, who were willing to spend this amount of time in their lives, could very likely be their guild's main force. The guild chat's discussion topic was naturally about the Guardian's blessing that they had obtained after the completion of the Guardian Challenge. Players of all kinds of classes were talking over how they should allocate these extra points. Quite a few were browsing through various guides on the web while debating with others. This sort of low-level talk was beneath Ye Xiu, although for these noobs, Ye Xiu still felt like he should help guide them so they wouldn't go off on the wrong path. After seeing just a few minutes of their discussion, Ye Xiu already saw several flaws in quite a few of the players' arguments. He had no idea where these noobs found such trash guides, yet they were treating them like treasures and spreading them around. Hey, the one called Prideless. Ye Xiu couldn't bear it any longer and finally called out a name. Here, Prideless was one of the very active players in the discussion. When he saw that he had been noticed by the guild leader and had even been called out by name, he felt extremely happy and immediately replied, "Where'd you find that guide? It's wrong." Ye Xiu was quite direct, simply because the nonsense Prideless was spouting was too far off. It didn't even seem like it was right. Ah, Prideless was startled. Most Ghostblade skills are magic-based, so adding intelligent isn't wrong, but whether you're a phantom demon or a sword demon, putting points into intelligence can't be the only choice. Sword demons have a few physical damage attacks. In addition, a lot of the time, you'll be using normal attacks to connect combos, so adding a few points into strength is a must. Now, as for phantom demons, they have several skills with crowd control effects. Spirit increases the effectiveness of these crowd control skills, so phantom demons also need to add a few points into Spirit. The guide that you posted doesn't even consider the basic characteristics of your class. If it's a magic-based class, then put everything into intelligence. It's not quite that simple. Ah, Prideless stuttered, but wasn't able to say anything to defend himself. He was having trouble understanding what Ye Xiu was saying. And that battle mage guide. Ye Xiu switched the topic and pointed at a different guy who was also spouting nonsense. Ye Xiu knew even more about battle mages. With just a few words, he had made the guy go speechless. There's more. There's no point in saving up your extra points from the Guardian's blessing. If you add it wrongly or want to change it, you can just leave the guild and then join again. Ye Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw that these guys were telling everyone to not randomly allocate their points. When the player left the guild, these extra points from the blessing would be automatically taken away, so they could basically reset it whenever they wanted to. And the team that's going to dungeon, what type of party composition is that? You'll definitely die from exhaustion. Get 2 magic classes in there. The more Ye Xiu looked, the more problems he discovered. Some of these players saw that their dungeon count had reset, so they immediately went and formed a party with their new guildmates, but didn't pay attention to the party composition and just added whoever wanted to join. There were many classes in Glory. Different matchings had different strategies for them. For different dungeons, there would always be the most efficient, safest, etc. party compositions. For new players, being able to easily beat a dungeon was quite impressive. In Glory, every time you entered a dungeon, the dungeon count would decrease whether you succeeded or failed. Ye Xiu had only been playing with experienced experts. Even without them, by having him in the party, they would never fail a dungeon. But for new players, dying in the dungeons was a very common occurrence. This was also one of the main reasons why the players from top guilds were so far ahead of normal players in levels. With experts carrying the party, beating a dungeon would be much quicker and easier than having those who were studying it for their first time. Even if these dungeons all had detailed guides, if new players wanted to turn the guide into a reality, they would usually die several times trying. And every time they died, let alone not receiving the dungeon rewards, they would lose experience. With this back-and-forth situation, how would these experienced veterans not level faster? In the past, Ye Xiu had only the few around him to care about. He could carry Tang Ru, steamed bun invasion, or whoever else was on their team to beat any dungeon with ease. But now that he had a guild, there were several hundred members. Thus, he could only talk and talk in the guild chat and fix any problematic areas. Ye Xiu was too preoccupied with this to do anything else, and spent a good 2 hours talking in the guild chat. And this was when the guild only had a small number of players, yet there were still so many issues. When all 500 players got on, what would that be like then? Ye Xiu thought of this and felt his head go numb. Creating a guild in itself was already troublesome. This was why pro teams always had someone else specially deal with it. How could pros personally run over to do this sort of work? Ye Xiu didn't want to do it either, but he didn't have anyone else to help him. Tang Ru was skilled, but she might not be any better than some of these new players in this area. Steamed Bun Invasion was more familiar with games, but letting him manage a guild. That would only happen if his head got smashed against a tree. Suma Cheng and Chen Guo could help, but because they had their own work to do, the amount of help they could offer was limited. After thinking and thinking, Ye Xiu's gaze stopped on the 2 level 36 characters in his guild. These two hadn't gone offline yet. They seemed to be all-nighters. When they were fighting against the Guardian, Ye Xiu had actually been paying attention to everyone's movements. Those cheap tricksters who weren't trying or weren't following orders on purpose couldn't get past Ye Xiu's experienced eyes. This was what made him even more confident that they were spies. The huge rush of high-leveled players coming in all at once wasn't the only reason. However, even though Ye Xiu had perceptive eyes, he had still been fighting, so there was no way he could have caught everything that they tried to do. For example, Ye Xiu couldn't remember how these two characters performed. This was another reason why he couldn't be sure of these two players' identities. If they really are spies, could I maybe use them? Ye Xiu pondered. Spies were always extremely loyal to their guilds and were definitely experienced glory veterans. Even though they might not have the ability to manage a guild, Ye Xiu didn't need such an experienced manager yet. He just hoped that they'd help him share the responsibility in guiding these noobs. This was something any glory veteran could do. But this assignment would be very different from the Guardian. Assigning them such a task would be the same as making them a core member of the guild. This was something that any spy would want to do. Once they entered the inner circle, they would be able to set up a reputation in the guild. If they really were spies, then it'd be very dangerous. How should I do this? Ye Xiu quietly pondered. In the end, he clicked on the two names and requested to add them as friends. One of them quickly accepted it while the other didn't respond, even though he was clearly online. The one who didn't respond was Blue River. Right now, he didn't know what he was doing. He was using an open account and wandering around randomly in glory. When he saw the notification and opened it, he was surprised to see that it was a friend request from Lord Grimm. What's the meaning of this? Blue River discovered that life truly was hard. All he wanted to do was run around and daydream, but something always had to pop up. He thought about it, and then in the end, he decided he didn't care anymore. He accepted the friend invite and then sent a message. "What's up, guild leader? You busy? If you've got nothing to do, why not come to the arena and compare notes with me?" The other side responded as if they were good old friends, making Blue River surprised again. Could he have recognized me? No way. Blue River mumbled and then replied, "All right, where to?" The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 358 Chapter 358. Getting straight to the point, Blue River asked as he returned back to the city from the wilderness. He headed straight for the arena. When he found the room that Lord Grimm had set up, he found that Lord Grimm and the other level 36 player were sparring. It only looked like a battle, though. After taking a closer look, he felt that calling it a battle would be too praiseworthy for the chicken feather. It was a completely one-sided match. With the chicken feather's skill, Blue River couldn't bear to watch anymore. In his eyes, this chicken feather really was someone who had just started playing glory. And his opponent, God Ye Xiu, with 10 years of experience. Not long after Blue River joined the room, the chicken feather fell to the ground, defeated. He even sent out a sad face emoticon afterwards. Blue River reckoned that this chicken feather probably couldn't even recognize how terrifying his opponent was, or perhaps even thought that he was just slightly worse. It was similar to how Tang Ru was initially. She wasn't good enough to tell how large the skill gap was. Ye Xiu was very disappointed too. He had fought with the chicken feather very diligently, but after 3 rounds he was already certain that this chicken feather truly was a new player at glory. A new player pretending to be an expert and an expert pretending to be a new player. It couldn't be hidden from Ye Xiu's experienced eyes. Again, the chicken feather had already lost 3 rounds in a row, but was still eager to give it another try. Take a rest for now. I'm going to fight with peerless looks for a bit and then we'll see. Ye Xiu said. Peerless looks was the id of the account that Blue River was currently using. The class was a blade master. He knew Lord Grimm was God Ye Xiu, so he didn't have any hopes of beating him in a fight. He simply continued on with his go-with-the-flow attitude. If Lord Grimm had wanted him to fight, then he'd fight. Blue River accepted Ye Xiu's invite and the two entered the stage. Start, Blue River asked after entering. Go ahead. Ye Xiu didn't say too much. Blue River didn't hesitate. At this moment, he didn't want to ask like he was a new player. He wasn't staying on this account in order to be a spy. He was simply using it to mess around. His blade light flashed and Blue River began with a simple sword draw. Lord Grimm was taking it very seriously too. He began moving before the blade light flashed and easily dodged the attack. How quick! Blue River gasped in admiration. When he had used sword draw, Lord Grimm had definitely been within range, but by the time his sword strike had flown out, his sword strike had missed Lord Grimm by 2 full units. This couldn't be done solely through his reaction speed. He had clearly predicted that Blue River would initiate with this move. Blue River wasn't surprised that this had happened, though. He didn't think that he had any chance of winning, so he was very relaxed. Sword draw missing wasn't anything to sigh about. He moved 1 unit to the side and then sprinted forward with a stab. Dong! Lord Grimm had taken out a sword and guarded against Blue River's attack. After guarding, he retreated backwards. The sword in his hands shifted back into an umbrella, and as he slid back, 3 anti-tank missiles fired out with a bang. Too quick! Blue River was helpless. His opponent was better than him in every way. He didn't have any time to react to the 3 anti-tank missiles. He tried to dodge, but he was too slow and was pushed back by the explosion from the missiles. Blue River rolled on the floor and experienced maneuver. Oh, not bad, Lord Grimm suddenly said. What was not bad? Blue River didn't see anything praiseworthy. Could it be because his role had been done beautifully? In truth, Blue River hadn't predicted that Lord Grimm would use a method to continue attacking. His role had simply been done out of habit. Whenever he encountered a situation such as this, he would instinctively do a roll. How could he now? This type of instant reaction made Ye Xiu feel that the person in front of him might not be a new player. Though if he wasn't a new player, it was very likely that he was a spy from some guild. Ye Xiu thought this as he attacked. Overall, against a god-level player, Blue River's situation wouldn't be too much better than a chicken feather. However, Blue River still had more knowledge. Even if he lost, he would at least know how and why he had lost. He wouldn't be like that chicken feather, who didn't understand the difference in the skill levels and only knew that he had somehow lost. Not long after, Blue River was sent flying and unable to stand back up. The first round had ended. It hadn't even been a full minute since the match had began, and Lord Grim hadn't lost a single drop of blood yet. Blue River felt his face burning. Even though he knew that he was up against a top god, he had still been confident that he could hit him a few times and at least prove himself to be better than that chicken feather. But from the looks of it, he seemed to be the same as that chicken feather and had gotten beaten up too. It seemed that he had overestimated himself. Again? Ye Xiu asked. Ye Xiu already felt like he had seen enough. This person definitely wasn't a new player and was quite familiar with the Blade Master Class too. Some of his moves had clearly been out of habit. In game, he would definitely be considered an expert. But apart from that, Ye Xiu was somewhat puzzled. He had been able to see all this in a mere 1 minute, and the reason he was able to was because this person didn't hide anything. This was what Ye Xiu couldn't understand. If he was a spy sent by another guild, wasn't he afraid of being exposed? Or could he have been employing a reverse psychology tactic? What do you think? Ye Xiu was still thinking when the other side replied. That'll be it then, let's leave, Ye Xiu said and left the arena. Blue River was baffled. Why had he been suddenly called out to play a round of PvP? After exiting the arena, Blue River quickly received a message from Ye Xiu. How many years have you been playing Glory? Quite a few years, Blue River replied. Which guild? Ye Xiu asked. So direct. Blue River coughed up blood, but he was too lazy to hide himself. Since he was going with the flow, he might as well answer the question. Blue Brook Guild. Blue River? Ye Xiu asked. No way, how do you know? Blue River was shocked. He was quite sure that Ye Xiu had the ability to tell that he was an experienced player from his previous performance, but being able to actually identify him was truly too terrifying. Even though he was also an in-game expert, he was still only a measly character compared to a pro. He had a hard time believing that such a god would care so much about him and even recognize his style. I didn't. It was a random guess. Such an accurate random guess. Blue River was speechless. Blue Brook Guild. There are only 3 Blade Masters there that I know, and that Poplar Beach doesn't seem like the type of person who would be a good spy. Ye Xiu said. So he knows Poplar Beach. Blue River corrected and asked curiously. Then who's the last person? Huang Xiaoshan. Oh, Blue River wiped a bead of sweat from his face. Huang Xiaoshan obviously couldn't be a spy. What's up with you? What type of spy acts like that? Ye Xiu had already begun scolding him. Blue River's cheeks were streaked with tears. This was such a weird conversation. He didn't know how to reply. You've already been caught, so why did you stay in my guild? Ye Xiu continued to ask. I was bored, so I just stayed, Blue River replied. Bored, HM? Then I'll give you some stuff to do. What stuff? Blue River asked. Help me manage my guild, Ye Xiu said. He instantly froze. Blue River pinched himself to confirm that he wasn't dreaming. He then opened up his chat log and looked carefully again to see that he hadn't seen wrongly. He then froze again. He couldn't understand where such a weird thought came from. Hello, Ye Xiu was still urging him. Help you manage your guild? Blue River asked back. Yeah, why? Blue River was very curious. Because you're bored. Ye Xiu's response made Blue River want to slam his head against the wall. Not that, Blue River typed. You know who I am, and yet you want me to help manage your guild. Yeah, what do you mean yeah? What's your reasoning behind this? Look. Ye Xiu began to help Blue River analyze. My guild has just been created and everyone is a new player, so they don't understand a lot of things. They very much need a qualified veteran to help them out. I'm a spy, Blue River stressed. With this line, Blue River felt that he might be the weirdest spy ever. But you're a spy who's been caught, Ye Xiu said. Blue River stared blankly. He suddenly understood a bit of what the god was thinking. He was getting straight to the point. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 359, Chapter 359. Babysitter Blue River froze for a good while before finally replying back. Why should I help you manage your guild? Because you're bored. The other side responded with the same answer as before, making Blue River grab his hair in frustration. In this strange situation, he reckoned that if news of this spread, everyone would think that he was mentally insane. He was a spy who had lost faith in what he was doing and even had his true identity exposed, but the other side had unexpectedly handed him an important task. If he didn't know that the other side was a god and that he was just a little shrimp in comparison, Blue River would have suspected that there was some sort of conspiracy theory revolving around him. There really isn't that much work to do, Ye Xiu began to say. If you look at the guild chat, you'll see that some of these new players are super newbie. I saw. Blue River hadn't really paid too much attention to the guild chat, but once Ye Xiu finished what he had said and Blue River looked, he saw that there were actually a lot of noob discussions going on. Ye Xiu had worked hard these last 2 hours trying to correct them, but even after correcting them, the new players continued to let loose with their noobish thoughts. Ye Xiu's knowledge and theories were being corroded by these noobs. The person leading these bunch of players wouldn't really be considered a leader, but more like a babysitter. This was something that Blue River was very experienced with. This was exactly the type of work a guild leader in a new server would do. It was just that when he came over to the new server, he also brought along a few helpers so that they wouldn't be like Guild Happy, which didn't have any experts at its core. Well, it did have experts, but only having God Ye Xiu teach a bunch of noobs was a bit too much. When Blue River thought about how there were 500 noobs, he also shivered, but he quickly slapped his forehead. Why am I even thinking about this? I'm the Blue Brook Guild's 10th server guild leader. How could I run over to another guild and be a babysitter? Blue River thought while cautiously looking left and right. Blue River couldn't let his coworkers know about this weird event. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lord Grimm continued to send messages one after the other. His messages were very clear. They were clearly explaining to Blue River how he should begin his task. Hey, I never said I'd help you, Blue River replied. Oh, then hear me out. Doing this can help you manage your Blue Brook Guild as well, Ye Xiu said. One person playing on 2 accounts and managing 2 guilds, that's got to be a first. Ye Xiu messaged once again. Blue River immediately began imagining the scene, but he quickly recovered. What the heck? Why does it feel like I've agreed with him? How much does Blue Brook Guild pay you every month? Ye Xiu messaged. Money was a touchy topic, but it had to be mentioned. In truth, players like Blue River could be considered as someone who played games for a living. It was just that, when compared to pro players, their jobs were more stable. They were basically Club Blue Rain's employees, with their work being to play Glory. The entire industry in Glory was maturing, including both the Pro Alliance and their professional guilds. Guilds that were backed by clubs were one of the types of professional guild, but apart from those, there were also other types of professional guilds that didn't rely on a club backing them. Some of these might actually be workshops that existed as guilds in the game. Substitute leveling, trading items, materials, etc. would all be covered by this business. As for guilds backed by clubs, they weren't as professional as these work studios. The only ones that were paid by the clubs were its upper-level core members. The rest were fans that gathered together to support and contribute to their favorite teams through the guild. Blue River was one of Blue Brook Guild's 5 great experts and the guild leader in the 10th server, so Ye Xiu was very certain that Blue River was paid for by Club Blue Rain. As for how much their salary was, Ye Xiu could only make an assumption. Each guild had different rates, but there wouldn't be too big of a difference between them. Blue River didn't expect Ye Xiu to ask this question, but from this he was able to see the other side's ambition. Only a guild with a pro team could hire employees to manage their guild. Not waiting for Blue River's answer, Ye Xiu sent another message. Well, it doesn't matter. We don't actually have any money, so go work first and then we'll pay you back later." Blue River coughed up blood. In the end, he just wanted free labor. Blue River trusted that Ye Xiu would keep his promise, though. Even though this guy sometimes made him want to grind his teeth, Blue River always felt that he was a trustworthy person. "I think that's it. Is there anything else?" Ye Xiu asked again. Hey, what the heck, I never agreed," Blue River struggled. "There's no need to be polite." "What, polite? I'm the guild leader for Blue Brook Guild. I don't have time to help you manage your guild," Blue River said. "But you have the time to play on a different account and blindly stroll around in my guild," Ye Xiu replied. After a short pause, he added, "And you've already been exposed too." Blue River couldn't answer back. He didn't really care about anything right now. He even implied that when he spoke to Changing Spring. As for how the club would react when they found out he wasn't doing any work, he unexpectedly hadn't thought of that. After all, he wasn't just some random fan who was working for fun. He was taking their money, and it was his responsibility to put in effort. The words that he had said to Changing Spring hadn't been a resignation. It was just that Blue River felt very tired and wanted to take a break and wander around without having to care about anything. But it hadn't even been 2 hours since he had started, and Lord Grimm had already handed him a bunch of stuff to do as if he actually was Guild Happy's manager. Lord Grimm had even given him the power to add and kick people from the guild. Blue River had no idea what to do at this moment. Look, these two noobs have started arguing and neither of them is right," Ye Xiu messaged. Blue River opened the guild chat and looked. 2 elementalists were discussing which path to take. Both were sticking to their own views, and it turned out that both views were complete nonsense. Blue River's knowledge of the game obviously couldn't compare to Ye Xiu's, and he certainly wasn't proficient in every class like Ye Xiu was, but he was more than qualified enough to correct some noobs. Blue River glanced at it, and in the end, he couldn't help but speak up and instruct the 2 noobs. When the 2 noobs saw this peerless looks talk, they thought he was another noob who had joined in on the debate, but then they saw that he had said that both of them were wrong and quite impolitely too. Though after seeing peerless looks level, they immediately became obedient. In game, being high level didn't necessarily mean you were an expert, but that was what a lot of noobs thought. Once Blue River started, he couldn't stop. He began organizing the members who were still online to do quests and run dungeons, assigning everything clearly and orderly. Blue River was clearly much better at this than Ye Xiu was. After all, playing in a guild was something that Ye Xiu had done before he joined the pro scene. It was something that he hadn't done in many years. "Who's this?" Suma Cheng and Tang Ru asked curiously. At this moment, Chen Guo had already gone to sleep. "Blue River, Blue Brook Guild's 10th server guild leader," Ye Xiu told them. The 2 heard this and had weird expressions on their faces. "Why would someone from Blue Brook Guild help manage our guild?" Suma Cheng asked. "I don't know why, but this guild leader ran over to our guild to be a spy and was caught by me. In any case, I know who he is, so we can just let him work. See, he's very good, much better than I am." After seeing how Blue River was handling things and that the guild chat was now neat and orderly, he could only feel inferior. "So is he a deserter?" Suma Cheng asked. "No idea, but I reckon that something's up with him. A guild leader running over to be a spy is already very unusual." Even when everyone else left, he still stayed. When he was called over to fight, he didn't even try to hide that he was a spy. When I asked for his identity, he just said it. "We'll see," Ye Xiu said. Hey, Ye Xiu received a message from Blue River. "What's up? What's up with this guild title you gave me? I'm not a babysitter. Get rid of it. Get rid of it." Blue River had been talking in the guild chat the entire time. Then he suddenly discovered that his character had a title on his head that said Guild Happy's #1 babysitter. Every guild member by default had the title Guild Roman 20 member. To those who had the power to, the word member could be changed. A lot of guild experts gave themselves impressive titles. Ye Xiu had changed Blue River's title to #1 babysitter. Even though it was quite fitting, Blue River was clearly unhappy with it. You don't like it? Then what should I call you? Ye Xiu asked. Nothing, just use the default. Blue River liked to stay low-key. Okay. Ye Xiu didn't make it difficult for him and immediately switched the title back to the default title. Blue River began talking in the guild chat again. Keep up the good work. After a few days, there'll be more people here to help you. Ye Xiu messaged Blue River. After a few days, Blue River didn't understand. Around 5 days, Ye Xiu replied. 5 days, so it's like that. No wonder you're at ease with me being here. I'll only be working for 5 days, Blue River replied. How could that be? As long as you're willing, you can keep working for as long as you'd like. Ye Xiu replied. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 360 Chapter 360 Steady Development 5 days. Blue River immediately understood after hearing this. Most of the high-level players had already joined guilds, especially the old players, who knew of the importance of the Guardian, and would usually join a guild early on. But some of them might be moved by the fiery opening of Lord Grimm's guild. Though if they wanted to join, they couldn't do so immediately. They had to wait 5 days after leaving the guild. As a result, after 5 days, Guild Happy would have a batch of useful players join, whether that was a lot or only a few. When that time came, he might not be the only spy though, since it would be a perfect opportunity to get high-level spies into the guild. Blue River had thought of a lot of things, though he was still stumped for words when Ye Xiu causally told him that as long as he wanted to stay, he could. Was God Ye Xiu really not on guard against him? He didn't even know whether or not to be on guard against him because, right now, he didn't know what was going on with himself. He had accepted Ye Xiu's task for some strange reason. When he was busily typing in the guild chat, he really didn't have too many thoughts. He was simply doing what Ye Xiu told him to do. But if this was his normal self, would he have used this opportunity to gain trust and become an actual spy? Blue River stared blankly. He felt like he was stuck at a crossroad. Should he go left or should he go right? It seemed like he would need to choose soon. One person, 2 accounts, managing 2 guilds. Blue River suddenly thought of what Ye Xiu had said previously. That had obviously been said as a joke. A normal player might be able to do something like this. But he was a professional with Club Blue Rain's name. With Club Blue Rain paying him, how could he help someone else do their work? Whatever. There's no point in thinking about it so much. I'll just go along with it for 5 days and then go from there. Blue River shook his head. He wouldn't think so much and just continue being busy in the guild chat. 5 days. It couldn't be considered as a long time, but it couldn't be considered as short either. In glory, 5 days was enough to set many dungeon records. This was something that many guilds cared about, especially after the creation of Lord Grimm's Guild Happy. Rumor has it that many of the guild leaders had woken up during their sleep from nightmares. In reality, what everyone feared didn't happen. After 5 days passed, when the level of Guild Happy's players increased another stage, Guild Happy didn't take down any records. There were even some who were initially filled with high expectations for Guild Happy, thinking that there would be lots of exciting gossip to hear, but were all disappointed after 5 days had passed. Day 5. Guild Happy leveled from level 5 to level 12. For a guild that always had the maximum number of players possible, this leveling speed wasn't actually anything impressive. And after getting past level 10, the excitement from the new Guild Happy members had died down a lot. The main thing was that Guild Happy had already reached level 12, but they still hadn't challenged the level 2 Guardian. A lot of talk, but no action. There were already many criticisms of this type from the outside world. But for top guilds like Tyrannical Ambition, this situation was quite rage-inducing. Not challenging the Guardian at level 10, could it be because Guild Happy wasn't strong enough to do so? Could the reason Guild Happy had been able to beat the Guardian at level 5 be because of the spies they had sent out? When the top guilds thought of this, the guild leaders didn't have any other thoughts than kicking people. But it was currently a good time to send out spies. 5 days. The players who had left their guilds to join Guild Happy could finally do so. This was something the top guilds were certain of. This was because there was no lack of players that had left their guilds to do this. Among these, Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition stood out. These two guilds had been crushed by Lord Grimm before. Quite a few new players in these guilds had begun doubting their guild. These new players didn't have that sort of fan loyalty yet. Seeing what seemed to be an even better Lord Grimm create a guild, many of them immediately thought of running over to him and quickly left. When they discussed whether they should send out spies or not, the guilds couldn't help but think of the guild members that had left and felt unbearably sad. The spies had to be sent out. This time, the top guilds didn't need to worry about whether their spies would become their enemies' free labor force. Even if they weren't there, the other side could still create a high-level 20-player team. On Guild Happy's side, the new wave of new players had been predicted 5 days ago. Most of the new players this time had left their guilds to join Guild Happy. Not fighting the Guardian after level 10 had made Guild Happy become worried. This was the truth. However, the reason that Guild Happy's numbers weren't growing as fast after level 10 definitely wasn't because of this. Even though the guild members' excitement had waned, ensuring that they could reach the max limit of players with every level up wouldn't be difficult. There were still many players on Guild Happy's request list. The reason that the numbers weren't growing as fast was entirely because of Ye Xiu. It was preparation for this batch of players. The players who joined hadn't hesitated to leave their guild. Some of them were from top guilds as well, so it was very easy to see how passionate these players were. Seven Fields and Sleeping Moon's group had switched over from Full Moon Guild and had even dragged a few of their good friends over as well. They might not be experts, but they were certainly experienced veterans. These players did not have high levels, but Ye Xiu welcomed them kindly nonetheless. Their levels fit together perfectly with everyone else. Having them level up with these new players would be a big help. As for those players with levels around Lord Grimm's level, having them carry the low-level new players to beat dungeons would be okay once or twice for a few days. But after a while, they wouldn't be happy. The veterans like Seven Fields who were at the same level as these low-level players could carry this burden. Their leading would be better than having these new players looking at guides and stumbling around in the dungeon until they passed it. Though the one who had worked the hardest was still Blue River. During these 5 days, Ye Xiu almost never saw Blue River on his main account. He saw him with his open account every single day, helping Guild Happy with everything. This experienced manager quickly made the players who didn't understand a guild's value see the advantages of a guild. They had organized themselves for leveling, dungeoning, and questing purposes. All of these increased their efficiency and reduced the difficulty. Feeling these benefits, the impression towards guilds by the players who had liked to play alone naturally increased. A level 12 guild could have a maximum of 1,200 players. On the 6th day since Guild Happy's creation, they finally reached that maximum. Ye Xiu then locked the guild requests. "What are you doing?" Chen Guo didn't understand Ye Xiu's actions. These days, she had been even more attentive towards Guild Happy than Ye Xiu. Whenever she played, her attention was on Ye Xiu's screen half the time. "We have enough players," Ye Xiu said. "There's still a lot on the request list," Chen Guo said. Ye Xiu shook his head. "It's enough. We're still only a normal guild. Our players aren't as loyal as those guilds backed by clubs. Our development can't be too quick. We actually have a bit too many players right now. Without Blue River's experienced managing, who knows what would have happened. It can't be that bad, right?" Chen Guo thought differently. Guild Happy's development had made her very excited. In her eyes, Guild Happy getting to a maximum of 10,000 players wouldn't be difficult. When the time for the Heavenly Domain challenge passed, 10,000 players joining the Heavenly Domain would create a huge scene. She had been expecting this scene to happen, but then Ye Xiu suddenly closed off the guild request list. "You've played the game for so long. You should have seen a big guild fall many times," Ye Xiu said. "There were reasons for those," Chen Gu said. "If we don't control it, those sorts of reasons will pop up," Ye Xiu said. "Then what do we do? Right now it's still in my range of control. We'll slowly grow in this way. After we officially create our team, participate in a few matches, and win some fame, the nature of our guild will gradually change," Ye Xiu said. "Oh," Chen Gu nodded her head and didn't argue. She really didn't know enough in this area to discuss things with Ye Xiu. "Then what now?" Chen Gu was concerned over this. "We'll beat the Guardian first," Ye Xiu said, and began pulling in people. Quite a few high-level players had joined. "There will definitely be spies from the top guilds among these, right?" Chen Gu said. "Of course, but it doesn't matter. There's nothing we can do about it," Ye Xiu said casually. The 20-player team was quickly created. After saying what they were going to do in the guild chat, no one objected. The Guardian's blessing was something that everyone wanted to have. With Ye Xiu and Su Mucheng's aggro control, the difficult Guardian challenge transformed into an easy and relaxed battle. And this time, not everyone could be a spy. Everyone listened to directions and tried their hardest. The level 2 Guardian seemed to be even easier than the level 1 Guardian, and it was quickly defeated the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown.